What's your opinion on the Madeleine McCann case?
My opinion is that they killed her, Jerry and Kate. What I've heard is that they were swingers, you know, and that they'd been anaesthetising the young girl, and maybe the girl body had to be disposed of because if it was found, it may well have had signs of sexual interference, which would then put an inference on the other two children being looked at, and maybe prevented anyone from leaving that country.
Boom, we're on. And today's guest, we've got Copper, John Wedger. Ex-Copper. Yeah, nearly 30 years in Scotland Yard.
Yeah, it's 27 and a half years.
Yeah, but you blew the whistle on a lot of paedophile rings, satanic stuff. You went into real deep waters, John, which is fair play. So we'll touch into that later on. First of all, how are you?
Good. Struggling. It's hard work, James. It is. When people say they have a calling, I never realised what it meant until I started doing this. It's a calling. As much as I walk away from this, I get pulled back twice as hard. It's where I'm meant to be, but it's tough, and it is tough. But someone said to me, "Are you not frightened?" I said, "My fear is a drop in the ocean compared to the fear of that child who's getting a blanket taken from over him. If we stand back and do nothing, you know, as Edmund Burke said, you know, for evil to triumph, it takes but for good men to do nothing. We can't stand back and do nothing. But it is deep, it is dark, and it is massive, and we have to wake people up to the reality of what's going on."
See, I didn't realise how in-depth it was and how satanic it was and how bad it is. I'm just a guy from Glasgow who's everyone just kind of falling in my path just now, where I can't turn my back for people exposing some of these gruesome crimes. Like Barbara O'Hare last week, who was involved in the Aston Hall, where doctors were drugging the kids, raping them, killing them as young as 12.
It goes on. You can take Beach Home, Shirley Oaks, you know, there's a whole plethora of these care homes everywhere, all across the country, you know, and they got shut down and they just morphed into private concerns, and it still carries on to this day. But I mean, Shirley Oaks was a big care home in South London, and they had 19 known paedophiles. And then you get deeper, you get into the fact that who is behind this, who's sanctioning this, and you've got to look at who were the cabinet ministers that were for child welfare, and then you realise that they're dirty as well. I mean, the last 5 prime ministers, they all have what they call PAs. They're not personal assistants, they're political advisors. Every one of these PAs, you know, right the way back down to Thatcher and beyond that, had involvement with child pornography, either downloading or child abuse investigations against them. Every single one. You know, I mean, there was one guy, I think his name was Patrick Rock. He might have been either Tony Blair's or Cameron's PA. He was caught with thousands and thousands of images, right, child abuse images, and I think it might have been Cameron. Cameron put him in charge of internet security, and it's dark and it's dirty, and it honestly, you've got to look at who either attacks you or who backs you, and there your answer is. But it's well established. It's been going on for a long, long time. And if we look at our criminal justice system, I don't mean to domineer anything here, James, but, you know, back in 2003, they brought in the Bad Character Act in the UK, which says that anyone who had a propensity for a certain type of criminality, it could be brought in during the trial. Years ago, they couldn't on hold do it until they were convicted or acquitted, right? And people thought, it's a massive leap forward. But one of the things they kept tarnishing people with was dishonesty. You're a man of dishonesty, a woman of dishonesty. And that was offences of theft, right? Shoplifting or whatever. It's dishonest crime. But when you say the word dishonest, you instantly think liar, liar, liar. They knew this was coming out on massive scale. They knew it. This bit of legislation, in my opinion, was brought in to attack victims and survivors. And they could also not only use criminal convictions, but they could use reports from schools or care homes. So when these kids were reporting these abuses and I want to touch on what you said about this Aston Hall. In the schools, that they were told they were liars. A report was made, this kid is a liar, a fantasist, right? And if it went on, what they would do to the kids is they would then say, right, if you carry on lying, you'll end up where the liars go, and it'd be next door. So these care homes, kids' homes, next door would be the mental institutions where they would section them, and they never got out. And I know one girl, she's a campaigner for us, and she walked in she'd been abused in her home herself, but she'd walked in on a little 6-year-old girl being raped by one of the night porters. She went and told the housemaster, who they used to call uncles and aunties, to give it a homely thing. And when she did that, they sectioned her, 11 years old, for life. She managed to get out, and they never managed to get back.
Well, that was the thing with Barbara O'Hare. She said there was a checklist: kids from broken homes, personality disorders, homeless, kids who never had parents, because if they take them into a mental institute, they sign them off as crazy. So if they run to the police, they wouldn't believe them.
Well, no one's coming for them either.
Yeah.
No one's going to come and get them. And this is one of the things when and we'll get onto it, the timeline thing, but when I looked at what was going on, I realised that a lot of these children were what they call missing persons. So when they go, thousands of kids go missing every day, they do, but they do turn up. But what they don't do is debrief these children and say, what you're doing when you go missing. Now, I worked in one department for child abuse, and I said when I moved there, and this was not too far away from here, we're in East London at the moment, and I said to my sergeant, on my first day, are there any problems with children involved with prostitution? She said, no, not at all. We've had an officer that looked into it for 2 years, never one case. I got a fax sent through from social services, sent through to me within 10 minutes of starting there, and I rang up the first care home and I said, excuse me, I told them who I was, how many kids go missing from your home every week? They said, we usually use out of about 5 kids, the average number was 5 kids, we lose 3. I said, come on, cards on the table, what happens to them? They picked up, taken the brothels. So within 10 minutes, I'd found 3 kids. By the end of 5 days, I'd found 50 children. Whereas before then, and child prostitution, and people don't like that term, but it is what it is. Right? If you don't look for it, it ain't there. It's hidden, it's gone away. And this will one day be a national disgrace. And then what goes with that? Depression, suicidal issues, self-harming, diseases, alcoholism, drug addiction. You can't go in any sort of long-term drug rehab centre and not find that a good percentage have come from a very damaged background, childhood background.
Yeah, it is all connected, but I think something's coming to a head. I think you look at the Prince Andrew scandal, you look at the Epstein, for that to be getting airtime as well, and for him to even do Prince Andrew to even do an interview, shows you that pressure must be getting put on somewhere.
Of course, and you can see the arrogance of them, because that interview was appalling. I think anyone who's got a half a modicum of intelligence will realise it was a farce. But again, you just got to look at this shower of scum that they are. I mean, his brother, Prince Charles, I knew one guy that was a protection officer for that family. He said he's just weird. You go near him and he shakes away. But he was protecting for 14 years Bishop Peter Ball, who was bishop for, I think it was down in Eastbourne, in Sussex, and he was abusing kids in his care. He was raping them, basically, and one of them committed suicide. He was protected by the Archbishop George Carey, who is now Lord George Carey. And then when the police did have the balls to go and do something about it years later, numerous victims later, scores of victims later, and a suicide later, they found letters to Bishop Ball from Prince Charles denigrating victims, saying that they're wretched individuals, they're liars, how dare they defame your name, when it was categorically proved that Bishop Ball was a very active, sadistic paedophile. So we got Prince Charles protecting this bloke, housing him for 14 years, and now we got his brother that is involved with a 14-year-old girl. The man is a paedophile and has been for a very, very long time. And these islands always crop up in child abuse inquiries, because once you're on an island, where are you going to go?
Yeah, you're stuck there. It's like you're dead anyway, as soon as you're there. Because if you look at the Jimmy Savile as well, remember the royal family are the most powerful family in the world. So the intelligence must be so high where they must do background checks to know people's... and Jimmy Savile had that. He was marked with that card for so many years, but yet it went undetected.
James, if I went for a job, and I got this job with the police, and it was a field intelligence officer, but I was dealing with... And intelligence is graded. And it starts off with sensitive, and they've got little colour codes, so they have a little yellow label, sensitive, and then it'll be a green label, will mean highly sensitive, and then it'll go all the way up to a red label, which will mean top secret. And you have to be vetted according to your access to that information. And I was to get access to top secret information for this job. So they said, right, you've got to go for vetting, high level vetting. And when I went there, I went for an interview. They wanted to make sure I was mentally okay to deal with the job, psychometrically testing me, and then they said, right, we've got to know your whole internet history. Are you involved in watching internet porn? Are you involved in swingers? And in online dating was a big one. They said, if you're on online dating, you will fail vetting. And it was really funny because it was a woman, a detective, a lesbian woman. She said, if you're homosexual, you probably won't get the job either. I said, well, in this day and age, she said, this preordains, this goes way above, political correctness, because you're going to have a propensity for more sexual partners, and there's going to be more scope for bribery. Right, so bearing that in mind, I mean, even I was engaged at the time to a Lithuanian girl, and they wanted to know about all her family as well, and her father had been in prison in Russia, and they got everything, so they really did a proper job. So that was vetting to deal with top secret information. So how the hell can people like Leon Britton, right? Leon Britton, who's now deceased, the former Home Secretary, have got the fastest ever promoted Home Secretary we've ever had, and the youngest, right, after Winston Churchill, get to that level when he had a propensity for young boys. How the hell did Jimmy Savile, when the intelligent... What we know, right, there's a world difference between proof and truth. Right, when you're in the police, this is why my campaign for police whistleblowers is so important, because police whistleblowers, police know everything. Right, we have access to the files, and we have access to intelligence. And when people read in the paper, look, so-and-so's been let off, he didn't do it, there's been a few celebrities, again, mindful of libel laws, right? But then you read the police intelligence, they've been at it for a long, long time. We've got the highest burden of proof anywhere in the world, right, beyond all reasonable doubt. And to prosecute a historic child abuse case, 2% success rate. So all that stacked against you, you really got to know your stuff in order to get a prosecution. But just because someone gets a not guilty or they don't even get charged doesn't mean they didn't do it. Mm-hmm. So when you look at all this information, you sit there and you realise these people that are cropping up. My mates still ring me every now and then, ex-colleagues, and say, so-and-so, do you remember him cropping up on a report or her cropping up on a report? And they've all been at it. And what I will say to people that watch this, right, whatever you see in the newspapers and all that, and they get off with it, there's always more to it, always more to it. And the fact that even the police are sniffing around them, alarm bells should ring. Mm-hmm. And Jimmy Savile was well at it for a long, long time. So, and having access to the royal family, that guy would have been vetted. And not only that, people like Ted Heath, people like Leon Britton and Lord Janner, they would have had what they call protection officers, following them about. Where are they? Where is their voice? I was given details of 2 officers, which I then went and I passed on indirectly via a cabinet minister to the Home Secretary. And these are 2 officers that were on guard at Downing Street. They were protection officers for Ted Heath back in the day. And 3 times a week, when Ted Heath was in residence at Downing Street, a car would pull up in the early hours of the morning, midnight to 2 a.m, and young 8-year-old boys were produced, one boy at a time, and they were taken, via a series of security checks, right, into his residence, and the door would be shut. And they both said to each other, we can't have this. They knew, clever lads knew, that if they mentioned anything, the sword of Damocles would come down like it did on me, and it comes down hard. So they actually accosted Ted Heath in person. And they said, right, sir, we need to talk now. They said, we want to talk in your room. He went in the room and they said, it stops, and it stops today. And the lad said, actually, it did stop for 2 weeks, but then they were moved, and then they were pensioned off. They took early retirement, full pension, bang, off they went.
It's sick, man, and it's scary because people don't realise the extent what's going on behind closed doors.
Well, James, you interviewed that lady Barbara, and ironically, a couple of days before, someone said that she's friends with Barbara, she knows her, and she said, talk to her, she's just done an interview with James English, and boom, it comes up. And what I say to people is, anyone who has children, right, look at your 8-year-old kid, look at your 3-year-old kid, and what do they see in these people? They anally rape 3-year-old children, and these are people that are in positions of prominence, power and privilege. These are people that are in the media spotlight. I could sit here and honestly, the names I knew because I was subject to this intelligence, I'd end up in prison, so there's no point doing it. And they're sitting there protesting their innocence, and you think, oh, I know who you are and I know what you are. And I'd just say you might as well get a whole blanket and throw it over the whole media industry, the entertainment industry on the whole, without denigrating them. But again, if they're innocent, we'll take a polygraph test then. Let's analyse your statement and let's see if you have or you haven't done it.
See, Terry Mullins, I'm good friends with Terry Mullins, who's the leading polygraph expert in the UK, who's now brought in eye recognition. For me, it should be getting used in schools, football teams, anybody that works with kids. Exactly. But again, the law is they can't use it in court. Is that because they know? Because other people will get maybe called forward and it maybe put their fucking
James,
shit at risk?
What we're looking at is an industry here, right? So bear that in mind, what you said about the court. If you've got a polygraph test and it's almost absolute, and there was this thing, you get these people say, yeah, but you can get round them. Well, there might, but there's ways around everything, but it's negligible, right? And they say if you put a stone or a pin in your shoe, I mean, come on.
That's all they say.
What bellend's going to do that? It's just a total nonsense. But they were breaking up families on the Jeremy Kyle show. They were that accurate. They could have got sued if they were inaccurate. But the fact of the matter is, these people can't pursue a legal case because they were proved to be a liar, right? So that's how powerful it was. Now, what people started saying is, well, why don't they use them, like you've just said, in our criminal justice system? But let's look at our criminal justice system, shall we? Let's just take a chronology of child abuse, if we may. A child is a cash cow from cradle to grave. The fact that these people abuse children, they do it for one reason only. They enjoy sex with children. They might have been abused as kids and they might have been hurt as kids. But you know what? Tough. We can deal with you as a victim once you put right what you've put wrong. Then and only then. Come and work with us then, and come and give us information on other paedophiles. Tell us about the satanic groups, and then we'll listen to you. But up until that point, you ain't no victim because you've gone on to hurt others. So if a kid ends up in the care system, that kid is worth money, right? So they go in there, they get £2,000 per week per child, and if they got special needs, they get more. Right, the kid inevitably, if it's not looked after properly, and then it ends up being abused, it's going to kick off at some point. That's just going to portray itself in mal sort of behaviour. What do they call it? Maladjusted behaviour. Right, so then you're going to get SENCOs, special educational needs people coming in, who are going to charge money. And then the kid's going to then kick off a bit more. So it's going to get the mental health professionals who are going to make money. And then it's going to go to the youth courts, the juvenile courts, who are going to make money. From the juvenile courts, unless there's intervention, it's going to progress to the magistrates' courts onto the Crown Courts, in the end, via the family courts as well, that make a huge amount of money. In the end, it'll end up in the coroner's court. So from cradle to grave, they're making money. So as well as a care home's £2,000 a week, you've got all the other professionals. You try and get a solicitor who doesn't charge less than £400 an hour. They even charge for faxes. They're the biggest bunch of crooks going. And then you've got circuit judges. So you're going to be paying £8,000 per day per trial. So there is no incentive to stop that gravy train that they've got. Now, if a polygraph test was brought in and how it should be, did you abuse a kid? Yes, yeah, boom, 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 and it's done. And then they get the sentence they need and the therapy they need, and then we can put society right. But all them people are going to be out of a job.
Yeah, but even the sentences, John, are so lenient that there's a man get caught with 500,000 videos and photos of kids as young as 2 being raped and only get 18 months. I get 6 months in Berlin for a fucking driving offence. Do you know what I mean? So why is the sentences so lenient on paedophiles?
It's funny that, because I was before the present Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, and this was when just after I whistle blew, and then the attack come on me. There was 9 attempts to imprison me for speaking out, and I sat down and I let her have it. And I was meant to have a meeting, me and her, one-on-one. And I went in there was 9 women. She was like the queen bee around this desk, with these 9 women. And I recognised a couple of them, and I know that they were both lesbians. What you make of that, whatever, it's just not a homophobic rant at all, right? And I thought, I've had enough of this. This is just wrong. This is meant to be me relaying my message to her, how prevalent this is. And I said exactly what you've just gone on about. I said, listen, I can go into a children's home. I can get a dysfunctional young girl. I can groom that girl. I can give her that attention she's never had, and that girl will think I'm her boyfriend. I will then have sex with that little girl, right? And then I'll get my mate to have sex with her. And then we will take her and we will trade her every night, making money out of her as well as having sex with her herself. We will then get her friends involved, and you have not employed one dedicated officer to deal with it. But if I was to lean over my fence and call my neighbour and I said something quite derogatory, right? I said you would have every unit down, I'll be nicked, I'll be banged up, I'll be in court by the morning, I'll be out of the house, the local authority will come on top of me, and I'll be on a register as well by the end of the week. How is that what society deserves? And she had nothing to say. And what upset me more was that I turned round, and when I said this racist word, and I'm not like that, it was proving a point, someone drew a sharp intake of breath. And I said, I've just been speaking about having sex with young girls, and no one blinked. Yet I say that, and you're shocked. And this is the mentality of these people. It is wrong. And there was a guy I worked with. He was a detective, right? And he got himself a job as one of these internet decoy things. So Scotland Yard set up this unit where they trained undercover officers to make out they were like little girls and get groomed, you know? Anyway, he was on this elite little unit, and he was going all over the place. He was giving talks on it, this guy, right? And he was involved in swinging. And I bumped into him one day in the pub, and he was with a girl, and he'd met her at a swinging party, and he told me, as well as being a copper, he was organising these high-level swinging parties. And he said to me, it's unbelievable, he said, because the top guy in my Masonic lodge, who was a Mason, he said he goes there. He said we've got a judge from the local Crown Courts going there in Hertfordshire. He's going there, and this place actually did end up. It was in Radley. It did end up in the papers as this sort of big top-notch swinging thing. And he said, everyone's going there. It's a good way to get connected. And he went to the toilet, and the girl was with. She didn't seem too happy at being involved in this. And we sort of got talking, and. Anyway, I thought nothing of it. I thought it was a bit odd. Anyway, about 2 weeks later, I'm going to get the train, and he's been arrested, all right? And sorry, it was a bit later than that. It was a few months had gone on. But he's on the front page. I think it might have been the Sun newspaper. He was caught. Now, they used to grade pornographic images 1 to 5, right? So 1 would be like a topless child, and it was negligible whether or not it was criminal, because people do take photos of their kids in a bath.
At the swimming pool.
Yeah. But then it goes down, and when it's level 5, these are children that are being sodomised and having sex with animals. And one of them will get you an 18-month prison sentence. An image. This guy had 2,000 level 5 videos, right? And they were found on a police computer that he'd stolen, right, from the City of London Police. He'd stolen it, and before he joined the police, he worked for the intelligence services, and he was in the intelligence regiment in the army. And so really, all of that, he should have been given 10 to 15-year sentence. He got a community service order, and he was commended for his covert work in Northern Ireland. So, this is back scratching on the highest level.
How's your head, John? Seeing those photos, images, innocent kids being abused, how does that affect you mentally?
It damages you, and it damages you to the core. It's part of your job is that you watch child porn. You have to grade it. I'm going to give you an example of how this damages people. And it's one of them things, it's a bit like if you used to see someone have sex with an alien, it doesn't make sense. It's like two things that should never go together. And it's when the real horror comes when you deal with the victims. And solicitors, they deal with one side. They never get a balanced view. Police officers do, because we deal with the victims and we deal with the suspects. It's when you deal with the victims and they break your heart, and they do. And there's still cases now that really, really hurt me. There was this little boy, and he was giving his testimony, and he was so strong, and I'm interviewing him, and he'd been badly raped, and they'd given him HIV, and he was only a little kid. Honestly, he was a little dot of a kid. And I was thinking, who's putting you in bed at night? He was in care, and he was frightened, and he was sitting there. Oh man, my heart was breaking. And you can't show any emotion, because you'll get your video thrown out in court if you start,
Well enough.
So I did the interview, and as soon as I did it, I just dropped everything, and I said to my boss, I'm going home. She said, where are you going? And it was middle of the day. I said, I'm going to get my kids out of school, and I just want to hug them, because I brought up kids on my own, all boys, and I said, I just need a hug with kids. But the office I worked in at the time, the CID office for child abuse, there were two teams of 5 detectives. And I was in one side of the building, they were in the other side of the corridor, and I went into theirs one day, and they were all alcoholics, every one of them. There was a girl, she was laying with her head in her hands crying. This was 9 a.m. It stunk of stale alcohol. One guy, he was still pissed from the night before, he was doing a bottle of whiskey a day. Another guy was banned from driving because he was a registered alcoholic and had actually been convicted of drink driving and got his job back. And there was another woman, she was just a bit of a heavy chain smoker and an occasional drinker. But, you know, they were all pissheads. And there's no help for you. There's no respite. The Australian old bill, they give them 2 years out and to come back into these jobs. Our police, they keep you going until you drop. And, of course, you turn to alcohol, which is what you do.
To mask the pain.
Yeah. You know, you turn to alcohol, and, of course, when it all goes wrong, they turn around and say you're an alcoholic. Now, what I've done is this doctor that the police were using, and they were paying him a lot of money to determine that these coppers, it was self-induced, ill health, and therefore they're not culpable. I actually corralled all coppers that have been seen by this fella and had that decision made, got them all together. I approached the General Medical Council, right, made a complaint, they didn't take it on, made 3 complaints. In the end, the third one they took it on, and I got every copper to make a statement against this senior medical officer, and we're looking at getting him struck off now because they have got a duty of care, and he was just being paid an inordinate amount of money just to really nut us all off that it was all self-induced, it was nothing to do with them. So there's no aftercare, and it sends you totally loopy.
Oh.
And if you look at police officers, there's a lot of domestic violence, there's a horrendous amount of alcoholism, shocking amount of alcoholism.
You're just getting used.
Yeah, that's it.
Because everything you done, John, you went against them, you blew the lid on because you had so much information on the paedophile rings right from the top, told you, we've been told you don't go through with this.
Yeah. Well, what happened with me was, I'll just give you a quick example to bolster up what I said. I took a case one day to court, and it was a guy, and this sort of conflicts with what I said last time about the copper who got convicted. And this was a guy that had been downloading child porn, and we went to court, and I'd graded these images 1 to 5, and I'd undergraded some of them because they were children from the Far East and they got less body fat, so you can't really determine their ages. So a 15-year-old Filipino girl might actually look 8 years old, So anyway, so the solicitor thought that they had an inner to get the case thrown out, saying that I was bad at decision making. Anyway, one of the images involved a little kid, a tiny little, I don't know how old, but it was an infant, on an altar, and I don't know whether it was staged or it actually was an altar with a priest raping this little baby, really, an infant child. And this solicitor had made this complaint about getting this case thrown out, and then sort of criticising my ability to grade these images, and said to the judge, no, we want these images written off his indictment. And the judge said, well, if you're arguing Mr. Wedge's credibility, then I've got to look at all the images. And they didn't want that, but he said, no, if you carry on arguing, this is what we're going to do. Arrogant tossers, that they said, yeah, we'll go ahead with that. So the judge said, officer, can you bring me the laptop? So I brought the laptop, and they were all in thumbnails, and he said, just scroll down at a speed so I can look through. And he's scrolling down, and you could sort of make out what was going on with a lot of them, and then all of a sudden he'd picked out this same image that horrified me with this priest. And he went, stop. He said, what's that? Enlarge it. So I pinged it up large on the screen. He went, my God, is that staged? I went, we don't know. We don't know. I mean, you could try and identify the location by plug sockets and things like that, what part of the world it was, but this one, it was too many, there was thousands of them, we couldn't do it all. And he went, and he downloaded that. I said, well, he didn't just download it, he exported it, so he made the image, and he'd actually put a comment on this guy, and we proved it was him. And the comment was, she loves it, she's really getting it, this one. And this judge was horrified. He'd never seen something so perverse in his life, and I genuinely believe he hadn't. And with that, he leans over and he picks up this pot of pens, and he stands up and he just chucks it straight across the court, and it smashes on the glass where the defendant's standing, and he went, get that bastard out my court. And we gave him 10 years. It got reduced on appeal. But, you can see that this was a civilian, was all of a sudden put in that environment. And I say this to people, you know, they're going about child abuse, you know, they'll get over it with therapy. Well, I tell you what, show a child porn video, and I tell you what, there wouldn't be a sane, decent individual in this country that wouldn't want hanging brought back, you know. But moving on to your last...
See, I think they should bring hanging back. I know in America they have the chemically for their...
But it doesn't take their thought process away, you know. I mean, they've tried it in the Scandinavian countries, but the mind's still there.
Yeah.
It's what they call the mens rea.
How, they say 1 in every 30, John, has got paedophile tendencies, which is 1 in every street.
Well, there was a sex offender profiler said that victims, we're looking at 30% of the population of victims. So, you know, the people it affects, 30%. Now, if it affects directly 30%, indirectly it's going to affect their partners, their family and everything. It affects everyone.
Yeah.
You know,
see the paedophile rings, and the paedophiles, when they go to prison, they end up getting a community, they end up befriending each other. And is there not a way we should put them into segregation units and keep them fucking away from everybody and anybody? Lock them in, put them in a fucking tomb, just leave them there. Obviously they've got their health and safeties and all that shit, but that shouldn't really matter. They should be kept away, solitary confinement, until they get out for their sentence. And
they shouldn't be a priority. The victims should be the priority.
Yeah.
The money should be on the victims, not on them. You know, and they knew that they were a risk, right? So if we look at the severity of crime, you know, there's nothing more on the indictment books than murder. It's section 1 of common law, murder. But murders don't need to be segregated in prison, right? But paedophiles do. And now, when they brought in what they call penitentiaries, which are penal reform places, right? I think Pentonville Prison was the first one. And this is where they knew that sex offenders against children were such a risk that they had to segregate them. But back then they used to have to put on that these person were not on normal circulatory exercise, NONCE, nonce, that's where it comes from. They knew even back there in the 1800s there were a problem. There is not one culture on this planet that allows that. Even indigenous cultures, they did a thing in Papua New Guinea. Now, age of consent varies because, you know, people grow up quicker in different parts of the world and they've got different attitudes to things. But you know, you take indigenous cultures, which they're illiterate, that, you know, they've not been educated, and they're devoid of structured religion. You know, they followed this group, and they said that anyone who hurts a child, what we consider a young child, they're banished by the elders into the jungle. They've got to go as far away as they can for 2 years. If they survive on their own, which is highly unlikely, they're allowed back in, but they are treated down at the level of a dog. So even in these cultures, it is wrong. So when we look at that, and I want to get back to the question you did ask me, I don't want to keep jumping the gun, but when we look at that, then we look at, well, what about our culture? When we look at a group called PIE, P-I-E, Paedophile Information Exchange, was set up in the 70s. They wanted sex with boys to be lowered to 10 years old. They were backed by Margaret Hodge, right, MP, right honourable, Patricia Hewitt, the longest serving female MP, right, and Harriet Harman, right, all backed them. And they ran a group, these 3 MPs, called the NCCL, the National Campaign for Civil Liberties. Harriet Harman herself wanted the age of consent for girls lower to 14, right? So we're looking at these indigenous cultures. Look at our culture with the backing of people that all went on to positions of privilege. And I think it was Tony Blair appointed Patricia Hewitt as Minister for Children, Children's Minister. And she was backing PIE, and they were even allowed PIE to give a talk at their end of year seminar in the London School of Economics.
The age of consent in the UK, see in the 1800s, I believe it was 12 years old. I think it was 12, 1880s. I'm not 100%, but I'm sure I read that somewhere. It used to be 12. Yeah, it can be in.
But people died at 40 back then.
Yeah, you know? I think though. Do you think people still have those tendencies because of the natures in the 1800s? Because things can pass down from generation to generation in your genes as well. Like you say there, some consent ages are as young as 8 and 9 for some countries to get married to kids.
Yeah, yeah, of course, and that's what I'm saying. It varies. It does vary. But there's that book that I brought. It's called Poison Bowl, and it's about the sodomy and the beatings within our public schools and how it was just a given that that's what happened, and it was endemic in our culture. And you know, you're taking kids from the lower classes end up in the care system where they're just preyed on by these wolves, these paedophiles. But then you get the upper echelons. They put their kids into what they call the public school system. It's only called public school because it's private, but the public have to gain exits under the Public School Reform Act in the 1800s or whatever. So schools like Eton, Winchester, and Radley, and Harrow, and all these places. I mean, kids are putting in there from infant age, you know, ages of 4, junior school age, you know, boarded, all the way up until they leave. Yeah. You know, in male environments where sodomy and this what they call the fagging system, where the older boys have got the governance for the younger boys, and the sexual punishments and everything is rife. What's that going to do to their minds?
Yeah. How was your upbringing, John?
Yeah, nothing like that. You know? Good. I mean, I had a good upbringing. I mean, I'm from London. My dad was a black cab driver. He was sort of estranged from the family, really, and him and my mother, they sort of split quite early because he was from like a Italian background and strict Catholics, you know.
Is that where your tan comes from?
Yeah. I think the Sicilian side of it. So so we never saw much of him. He died when we were quite young. Our mum worked in a pub. We didn't really have a great deal. I got a twin sister, and I sort of I left school very young, but I had quite a high IQ, so I managed to get on a course to be a trainee architect. I needed A-levels, but I passed the entrance test and they accepted me. But I can't sit still. I was inside and I didn't like it. So within about 6 months of that, I was working as a trainee bricklayer. And it was all right. I've been bricklaying the last few days, funny enough. It was all right, but the bloke I was working with was a bit thick. And I couldn't cope with him. So then I ended up as a telecom engineer. I worked for British Telecom, and I'm a good swimmer. I love swimming. It's like my passion. I just swam to work if I could have done. And I do like what they call wild swimming. You know, I've swam in lakes all year round. You know, I just.
Do you think that keeps you sane, John?
Oh man, and it helped me. And this, and if we go on to the mental health thing, when I was under attack, I did this thing where I swam. I did a lot with East Europeans, and they got heavily demonised before they came over here, and I really liked them. They were just great. I thought they were real tough, lovable people. And there was one guy, he's saying even in Lithuania he'd swim when it wasn't frozen solid in a lake, and he said it just clears your mind. So there's a lake near me, and I made it my mission that for every week of the year, one day I would swim in this lake with my dog, and it saved my life, to be honest.
Cold water exposure is good for the mindset. It will release endorphins, which will fight anxiety and depression. It's good for the skin. It's good for so many health benefits. So for anybody that's watching, maybe struggling, look up cold water exposure. A guy called Wim Hof as well. Me and my friend Jed, Neil, go up the mountains as well, get into the waterfalls.
Brilliant.
And the feeling after that, there's a sense of bliss.
It's a funny thing is, it gives you a warm feeling.
Yeah.
It's really weird because I went one day, but I do what they call pants swimming. I was just going in my pants, you know. And there was 2 guys were doing a triathlon, and they turned up at this quarry. It's private. You're not really meant to go in it. And they've got their suits on, and they said, "Oh, you know, we're going to have a swim." And I think it was February. And I said, "Yeah, so am I." And I went, "Well, where's your suit?" And I went, "I'll do it in my pants." Yeah. They went, "You're joking?" I went, "Yeah." So they jumped in and they got hit by the chill, and one jumped straight out. The other stayed. He said, "I want to watch this guy." And I got in slowly and I started swimming. And my
dog, do breathing techniques before that?
Slowly, yeah. And do you know what I do? I say, I'm one with the water. I'm one. My dog just jumps in. So if my dog jumps in, doesn't have a heart attack, then sure enough, I can get away with it. You slowly, bit by bit, a second, I'll go in a little bit each second, and then once you're up to there, you're pretty much there. But we get up to your throat, you give it about a minute, the burn goes, and I'm swimming along, and I did about 15 minutes. You've got to be careful how long you do. And this guy, he was in trouble. And I said, just imagine you're in the Mediterranean and you're in Mallorca. He goes, "I'm doing my best, mate." He goes, my knob hurts.
Yeah, that's the only thing. You can't see your balls for a good couple of hours. But the thing with cold water exposure, we jump into the cold water in the mountains as well. We actually walk up the mountains with no top, and I've seen people at the top when they're fucking crazy. What happens is, the man who turned away, if you stand in the water, adapt, breathe, your body adapts to anything.
course it
so
does.
your body adapts to that, and that
Yeah.
goes for the stresses of life.
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
actually just breathe through it, you adapt to the pain, the misery. It's kind of, that's what they call water exposure, because if you don't turn away and face it, you realise that you can be as one as the water. And it sounds crazy, but if you can adapt to the ice cold waters, then you can handle pretty much anything
What
outside.
I always did as well, I had this strange thing where I'm very self-sufficient. So as I was growing up, I was always educating myself, and I was always at night school, and I learnt welding, plumbing, everything,
Why, John?
because my father was absent, and I would sit there and think, I want to be the best I can. I'm not competitive.
On a mission.
I just wanted, I didn't want to rely on anyone, and I'm very independent, and it really served me well, and it did. And on top of that, I would swim, so I always made sure I was fit, swim, and I used to always cycle to work. Even when I used to work just down the road from here, and at the time I was living in Hemel Hempstead, so I would cycle 35 miles in, and sometimes I would cycle home, because I had to do it. But what it did was it gave me a resilience, and it made me work hard, and it made me not rely on anyone, and it really sort of got me through the dark times, because when you're under attack, you go under, and what the police do is they isolate you, and you've got no one, and no one comes to help you, because they're all sycophants and they're worried about losing their pension, so no one stands with you. And it was funny now that the people I'm very close to and are very dear to me have all done serious time inside, all of them. But you asked me earlier on, James, about what they did to me. Now, I was working on Vice, and I'd uncovered child prostitution ring involving kids as young as 9 up to 14, and lots of them. And they were going all over the place, but they were going to very wealthy places. So we're seeing it coming out now. It's a bit different to what we're seeing in the north with the grooming gangs, because this wasn't ethnic specific. This was everywhere, and involved boys as well, whereas the grooming's girls. So this was, but it was incredibly well established. And if you take London, is the most densely populated city in Western Europe. It is the most diverse city, one of the most diverse cities in the world. We didn't have like the Kashmiri Pakistanis running everything. It was across the board, and it had been going on for a hell of a long time. So when I spoke out against it, I thought I'd be praised. There was only 2 of us working on it. I was dragged in initially to an inspector who just sort of ripped into me for no reason, and then I went before the detective chief superintendent, and he was a guy, he used to cycle, so we had quite a lot in common, this guy, and he was quite well liked. And he turned around and said to me, "What the fuck have you done?" He said, "This can never get out." He said, "This can never get out." He said, "If this gets out, John," he said, "we are fucked, past, present and future. You've got to shut your mouth." Now, I brought up 4 kids of my own, which added to a lot of hardship as well, because it was just my income, and I've always been skint as a result. And he said, "I promise you, if you mention a word of this, John, you are going to lose your home, your job and your children. You've got to shut your mouth." He said, "You've got no idea what you're up against. You'll get thrown to the wolves." And the way he said it, he had meaning behind it. He knew what he was saying. He was confident enough to say that. And because I never spoke out, almost every single one of them threats they nearly carried out. And I never really understood why until I teamed up with the other whistleblowers. I'm now a member of the government panel now for the independent investigation of child sexual abuse, and realise that this has been going on a very long time, and there's a lot of people involved.
What information was it you had?
Kids were being taken to very, very upmarket restaurants. There was a member of the judiciary involved. There was someone high up in the police involved. And these kids were being taken to very, very wealthy establishment places for sex. But they were traded everywhere, James. So they were not just traded in posh places where they could be getting 500 quid an hour for a kid. They would, a minute later, they could be taken to, an East End crack house and traded for crack. They were just traded everywhere. These kids were just being used as a massive commodity.
And it came from the top. Don't go any further with this.
Yeah.
Why did you want to be a copper?
Well, I didn't. And this is where it come into it, because I used to swim a lot, and I thought I want to do a job where I can swim every day. So I thought I'd join the fire brigade. So I put in to join the fire brigade. But my twin sister was a fingerprint expert for the police, and she said, "Look, join the police. The Met Police have a diving unit." And I trained as a commercial diver, but there was no work. I trained up in Fort William, and there was no work for them. So I thought, I could do that, but I didn't actually like the police. I just and the reason I didn't like it, I don't like football, right? And back then there was a lot of hooliganism, and all you ever saw on the telly was the police being beaten up by football hooligans. And I thought, well, I don't want to spend my time being smashed about by someone on a football field. I don't like football, and I don't want that. So my sister said, look, I'll get you the forms. Now the forms were massive. The fire brigade was like a pamphlet, and I actually passed both of them. And what happened was the job I was in was given redundancy, and both start dates were almost the same, but the fire service wanted me to start in February, the police wanted me to start in April, and the job I was in was giving me redundancy in March. So I took the job that would give me redundancy, and then I could do the I wanted a job, so I took the police. I didn't like it. I didn't like the training. I hated regimentation, absolutely hated it. There was a lot of guys from the military that loved it. I have a difficult thing with respect, right? A leader should lead. I think leaders are born. I don't think leaders are made, and they lead by example, and they have compassion. I had a guy who was like a stepdad to me, and he was a very violent and dangerous man. He was terrible. He was always being arrested for fighting, and he died really as a result of his violence and that. But he was really good to me. But he was a hard man, but he was a fair man. You know. So when I joined the police training, they were bullies, and they all thought they were hard men, you know, pushing people about, and it was just, and I couldn't respect them. So training, I found, I didn't like it, and I'd have been no good in the army, no good whatsoever. I didn't mind the physical side of it, the intellectual side. It was very high. You got tested every day. They'd have role plays, but it was all false. It was all a nonsense. And again, the university kids seemed to do well at it because they could sort of mould into that stupid environment. And the military guys did well because they loved being told what to do on marching and all that. And I'm not denigrating any of them. It's just, you know, my side of things. So I didn't like training. But then I went to South East London, just across the water from here. And it was the worst part of London, you know. And I just flourished. I did so well. I did so well on the street, and then the natural progression was to go into the detective branch, and I got into there, and I was very good a communicator, so I was used really to get information, and it nearly cost me my life on a couple of occasions, but it was good, you know.
How did it nearly cost you your life?
Because I ended up, I've done many specialist departments, and everything in the end ultimately was pushing me towards the children, but there was a little glitch in it where I was asked to go on to when I was on the Vice unit. They had what they call a gaming unit, casino unit, and they were the only dedicated one I think in the world. I think there might be one in America. The Highway Patrol sort of governs gaming for some reason out in America, but they haven't got dedicated detectives on it. And because London's got, I think we've got 23 casinos, and London's casinos pay out more than anywhere else in the world. Right, it's really weird. People don't believe it.
Even Vegas?
More than that, because the upmarket Mayfair ones are so exclusive. Tens of millions go out that door, you know, and no one ever knows. And you will just see a door. If you go down Curzon Street, you get there, you have a walk down Curzon Street, I think there's 3 upmarket casinos. They're the highest paying casinos in the world, these 3.
I'll need to send a couple of the boys that have been on this show before down there.
Yeah, well, and so I started dealing with casino cheats, and I was just become very good at it. And they thought that there were hundreds of these gangs from all around the world. They weren't. There was one gang, and they were all Kurdish, Turkish Kurds, you know, and they were just awesome. There was a East European gang that was doing roulette, but these were poker cheats, and I sort of then started shutting them down. But it turned out there was an organised crime element to it. And as I was shutting them down and I was raiding them, I was also seizing heroin. And I've got to be careful what I say, because some of this is undisclosable material. It is highly, highly dangerous for, you know, even now, what went on. But in 1 week, needless to say, I'd seized just short of 300 kilos of heroin, and it was something like 89 to 90% purity. It was all heading to Leeds and to Glasgow. Glasgow, they got bigger money, so I really upset the Turkish mafia. Oh. And so what was happened then was there was a contract put out to have me shot. Now there was an undercover cop that was working, I think for the National Crime Squad, that had infiltrated the Turkish mafia, and there was cards were passed around in coffee shops and that with my picture on it, and they called me the blue-eyed snake. And they said, because I was just always scruffy, and they said, be careful of this man if he comes nosing around. You know, he looks like one of us, because I was dark, but he's got blue eyes, and he's actually a copper, John Wedger. And then I kept seizing the heroin, so there was a contract pay out for £40,000 to have me shot.
Which is cheap considering if it's 300k,
Yeah,
you're talking millions and millions.
What happened to start with was that I went in to deal with one guy, a Turkish guy at one of the central London police stations on a rebail, and his solicitor was with him, and we went in this little office, just off the front office of the police station. I got a little interview room. So his solicitor was an ex-copper, and he was quite a nice guy. I always got on with him, and this cheat was there, and he said, the solicitor said, he wants to have a word with you on your own. I went, are you sure? They never leave, the copper alone with the person, I said, you sure? He went, yeah, I'm going to have a cigarette. All right, so I went in there, and he's counting out £4,000 in front of me. And he went, take it. I went, nah, I'm not taking that. And he went, fuck's sake, John, take it. We know you've got children, you've got bills. And in the end, he said, we'll pay you 80,000, because they were making 80,000 a night, from the cheating and all that. And I wouldn't take it. I said, no, I'm not taking it. I'm not, no way. And they went, big problem, John. There's a big problem coming. And then what happened was a contract was put out to have me shot. But the guy it was given to actually went to the police and said, look, I want to sort of basically hand himself in, and gave the information and said, I'm not doing it. And it turned out that he'd been in trouble as a kid, and he sort of knew he did know me, this guy. Yeah. And so he handed himself in. So and he turned around and said, look, there's a contract out to get John Wedger shot, and it's because it was given to me, and I'm giving it now to you. Oh. So I was removed from that area, and I was taken straight out.
You've ruffled feathers every bit, every bit of work you've done, John.
Yeah.
That could probably be your downfall as well, is trying to be too good to try and clean up the system. What's your hardest interrogation you've ever did?
I dealt with one guy, and it's always paedophiles because they're intelligent on the whole. They're not honourable, but they're intelligent. And there was one guy in the interview, he was a psychopath really, and he'd always got away with everything, he was an absolute snake. And he actually, in the end, he did get off on an appeal. He did get 15 years, but he beat on appeal. He was very clever, but he was a paedophile, and it took a long time to get him, a long time, and the interview went on for about 8 hours. There was 3 interviews for 8 hours apiece, so he was a real head screw, that guy, but got him in the end. But there's been some really, really interesting ones. There's been some, there was one guy, he ran off to India. He'd abused his daughter, and he did a runner to India, and I got him back through it from India, and that really did take some doing in locating him and getting him back. And I linked in, funny enough, with the Indian intelligence services. Their MI, military intelligence services, helped me with that one.
Did you get him extradited okay, or was there a lot of laws for that?
Well, there was a way around it, but he ended up coming back to the UK, and we had information he was coming back, and then we got him. But it's strange because the Indian police and the upper echelons of their military, they're all Sikhs, right? And the Sikhs they're like their own secret society, really. And they're quite a formidable group of people, really, very, very well connected.
I like the Sikhs. I like their belief system. The Sikhs, they do a lot for the homeless as well.
Yeah, awesome, and they do a lot against child abuse. They're coming along to that.
Do massive work. Yeah, that's correct.
They're coming along to that, and not only that, they're just hard as nails. They're made of granite.
Yeah.
And I went along. I went to see this Sikh guy. He was a retired high-rank copper, and he went, "I'm going to put you in touch with a guy. He'll help you." So I'll get a message through from the High Commission, the Indian High Commission in the Strand, you to attend this meeting, very formal. You're not to drive. You make your way by public transport, and you to go on foot. And they even gave me the route I had to walk. So I went down there. I was met by a guy from their intelligence services who took me in a lift, and he took me right to the top of the building. And in the top of the building there was this just a little old Indian guy, this big oak panelled office, and he said, "You're Officer Wedger." He said, "You've been recommended to me that I should help you." I went, "Yeah." I said, "I want this guy." And this is the first time I realised how the security services work, and they've got access to everything. bank accounts a lot. Within about an hour, this guy had got me everything on this fella. They'd even sent an agent round to his house, and he started then telling me how they work in this country, and said every town hall will have a military intelligence officer attached to the town hall, which will have access to everything. So we override. He said your police intelligence is so low down, whereas we're right up here. And so he gave me all this information. He said, here it is, and if you disclose, the manner this comes to you, then we have a problem. No, you have a problem. But as I went to walk out, I thanked him. I had this noise. It went like, thinking, what's that? And he said, officer, he said, you don't understand Sikh rules. I went, what? And he'd opened a bottle of Johnny Walker. And he said, we've opened it, now we finish it. And the three of us sat there and done the whole bottle of
Johnny Walker. You must have been pushed.
That's why he said, don't drive. And we sat there and drank a lot, I know there's some Sikhs, they're not meant to drink, but there's others, they love a whiskey. They really...
How was it then, John, how is it to interview paedophiles?
They're very clever, and what you got to do is a lot of coppers, they because I ended up teaching interview skills, and there's nothing sneaky about it. It's a thing called reciprocity. I give you something, you give me something. If you're in a hole, you want to help out that hole, and like we said to you, criminals get caught because someone grasses them. Grasses, they're age old, they work. Surveillance, iPhones and that are good now. They solve murders on iPhones.
They say there's more informants than police officers now. Oh,
it's just everywhere, and you got to protect them as well. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's a means to an end, and it's a good way of working. I did enjoy it, and I was very good at recruiting informants. But what you got to do is when you get a sex offender, they're emotionally they're stunted, right? If they've been abused, which a lot of them are. So emotionally, you've got an angry young child there, right? Intellectually, they're clever, right? Because when you get a career criminal, now I do quite a lot of stuff with Big Chris Lambriano, and of course Chris was a career criminal, and he started off, and when he told you about his timeline of offending,
it's the craze and stuff,
incredible how, but you won't get that with sex offenders. With sex offenders, what you'll get is, on the whole, they'll have no convictions. If they do, it tends to be for deception. But they won't. That's why these CRB checks are a nonsense when it comes to sex offenders. They are. If you don't want a thief working for you, they're perfect. Or you don't want a doorman who's going to knock people's teeth out, they're fantastic. Sex offenders are obsolete. They ain't going to work. So what you can't do is try and outwit them, right? And don't ever be a smart ass to people, because if I'm horrible to you, the last thing you're ever going to do is talk to me. So you split an interview into two halves. You have their half, then you have your half. Right, and a lot of coppers go in on the attack. You see it on the telly. I put it to you and all this, and it's you can't do that, right? So what I used to do was I would I'd say to my mate, you just go along with me. So I'd make out I'd been drinking all night, right, and I'd have a folder. Now what I would do, I'd know my case inside out. I'd know it so inside out I could actually almost verbatimly read their statements without referring to it. So I knew everything in that file. So I'd take in a load of papers, and I put them on the side, and I'd say, look, I always made out I was late and everything else. And I'd say, to my mate, I haven't read through this, And I used to put a cup of coffee on the side and then drop it on the paperwork sometimes. God, look, I don't need it. I can't be bothered to read. And you see them sitting there smugly looking. And then you just engage in conversation. Now, no comments are a skill in their own right, and actually no comments are the best tool you can ever have, because you can, if you know how to interview properly, really, really tie someone up with a no comment. And I know it's going to be people watching this going, no, sneaky sod, but it's...
I was just about to say sneaky bastard.
Sneaky bastard. Look, it's a battle of wits, and it is a battle of wits. You win some, you lose some.
Do you have a photographic memory, John?
I'm pretty good. My memory's pretty good. If I know what I'm on about, it's pretty good. Now, I interviewed Tracy Connolly, who's Baby P's mother, right? And the Baby P case, the little Peter Connolly, the little boy that was brutalised to death in Tottenham in London. It made the papers. His mum's just been released, I think. Anyway, they just brutalised this kid to death. They just did all sorts to her and her partner. And she was a nutcase, a psychopath, really. But when you interview her, everything was, I'm really good with my children. I put them on the naughty step. And you go along with it. You say, well, that's good. That shows that you're caring and you're doing it right. And what I'd done was I'd read the paediatric report, and the paediatric report was appalling. And it was, it's evidently backed up, and there was high impact trauma injuries that only a fist could have, a facial bruising consistent with a blunt instrument hitting at force. So someone smashed a kid in the face, And I said, look, there's injuries. We're going to have to talk through these injuries. So I'd always draw a little picture, and I drew a little picture of the boy and said, look, where this bruising on the face, how did he get that? And she went, well, she said, he bruises easy. And I went, oh, okay, that'll explain all the bruises, so go along with it. And she said, look, he was hit in the face by a toy. And I went, okay, and then they're giving you a gift now, a toy. It's a top. And she said, right, well, what toy is that then? Oh, it's like, she's actually drew a picture of like a knuckle duster. So, and what it was actually a teething ring, right? So it was a teething ring. So it was a round little teething ring that holds them by. So I got to describe it, and she said it's really soft and it's got the consistency of a wet sponge. And I went, okay. So she's now taken ownership of that her kid has been hit in the face with something with a consistency of a wet sponge. So I said, well who hit him? Oh, another boy, his friend who's also 2 years old or 18 months or whatever, and hit him really softly. And so what she's doing, she's taking ownership of the interview now. And she was saying that he hit him in the face like that. She's showing me. So I said, please show me. Show me. So when you interview, you only have to ask 4 questions. Tell me, explain, describe, show. That's all you need to ask. Open questions. Get as much info as you can out of him. And she's showing me and all this. I said, well, my God, you said the kid bruises injury. You weren't lying, were you? She went, no, I'm not a liar. They're saying I'm a liar. And I went, oh, right, now what about this injury? And it went on like this. Every injury was ridiculously accounted for. And, she's sitting there smug. So
she was sticking herself in every question.
Of course, and giving her ownership of it. And saying, okay, you're not being sneaky. Well, you are, I suppose, but you're not lying. You're not tripping up. She's tripping herself up. And she's had her off. So I said, okay, now, before we go, we've just got to go through what they've said. And then I turned and I just said, right, this injury in the face is conducive. This is a paediatrician with 20 years experience dealing with child abuse matters, blah, 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 blah. Read out all her credentials, and then read, this is a high impact trauma with a blunt instrument to the face, conducive with a fist travelling at speed, bang, bang, and then this, and then you said this, but hang on, boom. And of course, she turned around, she just stood up and she just went for me, in the interview. Spitting and all sorts. But, and then what you say, what? That's the monster your son sees.
So pushing the buttons.
Yeah, because, and this is what they do with grooming. You see, they're all decent, and the grooming, it's the same as people chatting a bird up. It's, you look nice, and this is what they're doing. They're being ingratiating all that. Mm-hmm. But their goal is to have sex with them or to hurt them or whatever. Right, and then when they don't, that's when you see the demon. So what you've got to do is don't put yourself intellectually above and be a smug bastard. I would never wear a suit. Suit again, it's official, it's horrible, it puts people ill at ease. Put them at ease, and again, give them a cup of tea, a cigarette, and all that. If they're a good person and they're not going to tell you anything, then they ain't going to tell you anything. You ain't going to get anything, But you don't need to be a bastard to them. But there are some people you need to use every bit of intelligence you can.
See, for a paedophile, John, did you ever ask them the question, why do you do it?
Yeah. And I'd say to them straight away, do you have a sexual interest in children? Yeah. And one guy said to me, he said something really odd. He said, I was in a house once, and he said, and there's 3 of us, 3 men in the house, and we wanted a boy. He said, we wanted a boy. And he said, have you ever seen heroin addicts when they're clucking? He said, they're marching up and down, they can't settle, they're, Well, yeah, of course. He said, paedophiles are the same. And he said, all of a sudden the phone rang, and this guy on the other end said, I've got a boy. And he said, everyone was relaxing. I went, phew. And I said, well, what is it then? What is it? He went, it makes you high. It makes you high. We enjoy it, and it makes us high. And that's it. And it's... But you look at the destruction it causes, and again, they're very clever. They will turn everything round, so they'll put themselves as a victim. They'll use all these different traits, or they'll feign illness and start crying, and they'll be saying, "Oh, I'm glad you stopped me. I needed stopping," and it's called cognitive distortion. Right, and they're putting it back. So you've just got to always be mindful that they're very, very clever at what they do. They are manipulating, and sometimes you don't open up to them, because the moment you open up to them, they're into you. They will then start asking you questions, and if you're not very clever, they will know everything about you and use it against you. And they will find your weakness and bring you to your knees, because these are very, very good social chameleons. They've studied it to a fine art, how to find someone's guilt and use that guilt to manipulate for themselves.
Did you ever lose the head speaking to one?
I'm glad you said this, right? I lose my head in a different way. I use my anger to actually, and I'm going to say this, and I don't think I've ever said this before, to destroy people. And I would use it to use my intelligence and everything to take them down. That's why I enjoyed doing it with the sex offenders. I would have them I was very clever at what I did. Very, very clever, and I would use every opportunity. Nothing was wasted with me. I would think about it constantly. I was taking paperwork home, and I was just knowing everything about my case. So that's how I used it. I would never come the hard man with it. The police is a very violent job, and if you stay on the street too long, you're just going to end up a thug like them, and so everyone gets knocked about, and I have been injured. I've had my ribs broken, I've had a knife pulled out of me, I've been smashed about and all sorts, and a lot of them did. That's especially when I worked South London, that's how it was. It was just, but I didn't want to go through my working life like that. I wanted to do other stuff, and I wanted to progress, so I had to get away from uniform policing. Now, you've mentioned about losing your head. I don't know if you've seen it. No, I understand that this goes out later than we're recording it. But Tommy Robinson has just been arrested.
Seen it?
Now, this is interesting. Now, there has been calls for me to reach out to him, and him likewise. I don't want to get caught up in that Muslim stuff, and I don't want to get caught up in the alt-right politics and all that. However, I'm going to side with him massively on this one, because his daughter was sexually assaulted by what looks like, if the information is right, a group of paedophiles who have got themselves down into like a paedophile haven, which is the Centre Parks, and they're in cahoots with each other. So you've probably got a conspiracy to commit indecent assault. So every one of them should have been arrested. They should have been searched. Their computers, their phones should have been interrogated. They should have done a Rolls-Royce job on them. And instead they arrest him because he detained one of them, and in the melee, one of them gets a bit of a spanking.
Yeah. Tommy got to jail because apparently the man grabbed his daughter, 8-year-old daughter's bum.
Yeah.
And he lost the rag, and Tommy got to jail.
Yeah.
And I'm not for the politics side.
No, I'm with you.
For the grooming gangs and what he does, it takes a lot of courage and balls to put himself at the forefront, because his life is in danger every single second of the day.
and this is the first time I've made a public testimony towards him. I know his real name's Stephen. And I say to you, if you're out there, Stephen, I don't want to camera, you did the right thing, my friend, you did, and I think you're going to get a lot of support for this, and I myself will personally back you on this one. I don't agree so much with the other, we differ in things, but on this one, you're bang on right. The guys were paedophiles, and I'm going to tell you now, and I'm sort of aiming at this at him and his little team there. We turned up a case, and for some reason they sent the detectives in first. They said, can you go to this address, a paedophile has been detained, and it was a Jamaican family had found out that one of the family had been sexually assaulting one of the young girls, very similar age to Tommy's young daughter. And when we went round there, this bloke was just like a battered offering. His eyes were hanging out. I don't think there was a bone left unbroken in his body. And at no point did we even consider questioning how that happened. Weren't interested. And we took him in. Okay, so he had to go to hospital, but he never said anything. And nothing was pursued on that. And it weren't going to be either. We weren't interested.
Can you imagine at the swimming with your kid and someone does that? You're close to, everybody's got a breaking point.
Yeah.
The strongest men can become the weakest, and the weakest can become the strongest. If someone does that to your kid, I'm surprised, because I know he can go for it as well. He will not back down. I'm surprised he never killed the boy, but he probably knew the backlash that we've got, and now the papers have blamed him as if he was in the wrong, which is sad as well, because this is the thing with media, they don't portray the right story.
They don't, and you look, they sent 3 coppers round. That was common assault, that could have been dealt with by a summons. They didn't need to nick him. There was no justification for nicking him. The 3 guys should have been nicked. They're on about a breach of the peace, continuing with a breach of the peace. Well, nick the 3 paedophiles. Go and search their homes. You've got a golden opportunity. I used to say this to when I talked to detectives for a while, and they're always on about getting the big job and all that. I said, they'll come. I said, but I'll tell you what, there's no worse crime than paedophilia. They went, well, it doesn't get reported much. I said, right, well, has anyone got a Tesco's where they're working? I went, yeah. I said, well, there'll be a guy begging now. Get talking to him, because I bet you he's on heroin. And I bet you he's on heroin because someone's hurt him. And I bet you if you become friends with him, he'll tell you who's hurt him, and therefore you've got a paedophile ring already. That guy's giving you a golden thing, straight away. And help him out.
How much funding is for trying to get grooming gangs to try and get paedophiles? Is there much funding behind that? Nothing?
Absolutely. I mean, I can only go when I was in post.
Why is that, John?
Because they don't see it as importance, but I think there's...
Is that because some of the high-profile police are involved as well?
100% in my opinion. 100% in my opinion. I mean, there is a good guy called Mike Veal, was the Chief Constable of Wiltshire Constabulary. He headed the investigation into Ted Heath. 34 children adults came forward on Ted Heath independently, saying the same thing. Ted Heath was a paedophile and worse. And allegations of Satanism as well with Ted Heath.
So what is Satanism, John?
Well, Satanism is the worship of a deity, and the abuse that goes with it is part of the ritual. So it's the antithesis of Christianity. So whatever we do as Christians, good Christians or whatever, they do the opposite too. So they will take Holy Communion, but the Holy Communion will be made out of feces, semen and menstrual blood. There will be rituals, and children are used in these rituals. The death of infants, there's a lot of sexual abuse goes on it, and and it's a power thing with it. There's a guy called Anton LaVey who's dead now, is an American, and he set up the Church of Satan in America. And it's funny, well, if you look at the Church of Satan, go on the website, and if you look at their mission statement, as it were, you sit there and think, wow, this is like a really good political party. And they start talking about, we're against bullying, we're in line with nature, or we don't agree with hierarchy, we don't, you think, wow, how benevolent. But ultimately, it's just a veil for what they really do believe in. There's selfishness,
There's a thing called adrenochrome, which... people have been sending me links over the last couple of months where this is the most expensive drug in the world, but where they get this is by torturing kids, because if they put kids under stress, what happens is the pineal gland releases this adrenochrome, I think it's called, where it gets into the bloodstream. So while they're torturing the kids, they're draining the blood, where this is for things like the Satanism. Is this happening? Is this real?
It's massive. Satanism is massive. I mean, there's a thing called the RAINS list, RAINS. If you put in RAINS list the word Spider Cat, there's an activist called Spider Cat. She has put together she's actually put online this list, but this list, it's to do with people involved in Satanism. And it was compiled by a woman called Dr. Joan Coleman. She's a leading counsellor and therapist, a psychologist at I think the Maudsley Hospital in London. So this was where the big mental health place was going on, and she was just really talking to the victims and finding out what the problem is. And it turns out that sex abuse was at the core of most of it. And then when she looked into it, those that were really heavily traumatised with things like DID, which is multiple personality, dissociated identity disorder, and I work with a couple of people that have got this, that are victims of Satanism. It's shocking, it's terrible what it does. But they started talking under therapy, saying, look, this is what's been happening to us, this is what happened as children. They were taken to locations in the New Forest, and they were giving names. And when you unlock a traumatic mind, you find out that with your brain, no one really knows where memory's stored. And now, I'm not a doctor, but I spent so much time around traumatised people and dealing with abuse victims, and that I pretty much think I'm, to a degree, a bit of an authority on things, and dealing a lot with the interviewing stuff and everything else. You sort of got to know the psychology and the NLP stuff and things like that, and profiling. It's all interlinked. Now, they don't know where memory's stored, but they think it's stored all over the brain. So if you get a knock somewhere, the memory's still there. Because if your memory was in one area, I mean, your memory's all about how you eat, how you speak, your language, your movement, and everything. So for self-preservation, it's there. But when you get highly traumatic experiences, you can't have them all over the place, because whatever you do, you're going to trigger them easy like that, boom, 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 and therefore you won't function. So in order to survive, it gets pigeonholed, but it gets pigeonholed in absolute infinite detail, and it'll get locked away, and it will stay there until at some point it is opened and released. And this woman was very good at doing that. But when you get multiple personalities, each personality would have their own mind, and you could have hundreds in one person. You know, it's really it's so interesting, because I get told off for saying that by people who've got it, saying we're not here to placate your enthusiasm or you know, your intrigue. But it's, unless you've dealt with it, I'd say look into it, because it's real, and it's.
I love the brain, and it's a powerful thing. I always try to study it and understand it. I wanted to know where my addictions came from as well, and there's so many different theories and factors, but the thing with the brain, you can change it, you can rewire it,
Of course.
how you think, how you feel, it's so powerful, but it takes time, it's not easy. Because there's no much funding for there's no funding for police to target paedophile rings. I'm friends with people from Scotland who run the Wolfpack Hunters. They have had over 100
the
convictions.
paedophile hunters, they're fantastic.
So they've had over, the group I had them on a podcast 2 weeks ago, have over, they've got 100% record of 100%
they're
convictions.
excellent.
I think half have still to go to court. What's your opinion on them? Because I know people think they're vigilantes, this and that. So
yeah, I mean, I give a big shout out to them, and they're coming to our protest. I do a lot of work with a girl called Lou, who runs a group for the south of England, and I was part of their sort of group, but didn't really actively take part in anything. I have given my experience to them. They've got to be careful when they go sticking cameras in people's faces, because they're going to end up with suicide on the hand, and if they're doing a citizen's arrest, that's going to be a death in custody with them on it. They've got to be very careful with that. There's ways and means. They should be doing it for ego things.
Yeah, I agree with that, yeah.
And some of these people they're going to are very damaged. And you can see them, you're thinking, my God, these are very damaged people.
Yeah.
So shoving a camera in there and all that, I don't agree with that.
But exposing them as well, because a lot of these people get community service and then they're back on the streets walking by schools as well.
Well, if they're convicted, then there's going to be public
Do you think they
domain.
should be wait until they're convicted and then show the video?
Yeah.
Instead of going live at the time.
Because they're going to end up
But there's no law against videoing them.
Well, there's no law, because you can film anything in public. If you go into private, then you're not allowed to. You need permission. But you can do anything in public.
Because I think what they do is amazing. I think putting their lives at risk. The boy who I'm friends with, he's had the jail more than 10 times doing what he's doing.
Yeah. Now, that's the problem, because you don't want to be, as the Bible says, a man down the well. Why go to jail? Because you go to jail, your family's exposed. And who wants to spend their time being banged up myself with farting other men? You know, there's no need for it, you know, if you can avoid it. So I'd say do your best not to. So don't go to jail, you know, it's simple as that. And the same people say to me, you don't name names. Well, I go to jail. I'm not going to jail because I've got children.
That's the thing with them, they don't want to stop. He's thought about it so many times, and probably including yourself. Why are you doing it? But there's just something inside you where you need to do it. You feel as if I've not got anything else. You're too deep now.
Well, the thing is with me, I walked away from it, and I walked away from the children. I didn't want to deal with children in my policing career, because I was bringing up young kids on my own, and so therefore to deal with other people's sweaty, smelly kids is nothing I really wanted to do. But it was like the kids found me, and it became my calling. But where it all sort of really got darker was when, like I mentioned about the Reigns list, and this woman was putting names on the list. If 3 people independently named someone, she put them on the list. And it's a who's who of celebrities and politicians and all sorts that are actively involved in Satanism. So the moment I started speaking out against Satanism, my word, that's when the attack really come on me. And that's when I realised there's something in this, you know, and this really is a dark underbelly in British society.
So how do you deal with that, getting attacked from people? So people say you're involved, or people who say he's an agent himself?
I don't give a toss. It makes me laugh because they're morons. And now, funny enough, I gave an example of one of the interviews you did with that lady who'd lost her daughter, and she gets attacked, she gets trolled.
Pamela Monroe.
I mean, yeah, Monroe, that's it.
Yeah, her daughter at 15 and she gets trolled, yeah.
She gets trolled. So what individual would troll that? I mean, I get trolled by people saying, John, where do I spend my five? John, and, you know, one of them was a well-known celebrity, and it's just idiots. They are morons. You know, they either back you or they attack you. If they attack you, then they're going to damage you doing your work. They know they're going to damage you doing your work. You do your work, so you want child abuse to stop. So actually they're hindering child abuse. So you have to look on them with very questionable eyes. Why are these people? I think there's something seriously wrong. I had two guys that were going out their way to really steam into me. It turns out one of them had been nicked for 2 rapes in the past, and the other one was investigated by the police for grooming a 15-year-old girl. So I thought, well, no wonder they don't like me. Yeah,
because that says that the paedophile hunters, the people who troll them and say get them off the street, take them to prison, I believe either they're a paedophile themselves, they can't really they have kids where they can understand that, but there must be some sort of tendencies there where how can you not see that these guys are trying to do good? They're trying to do good, the same as the Tommy Robinson thing with the grooming gangs. I don't agree with Tommy with the politics, I couldn't care, but with the grooming gangs and trying to expose people, I back that 1,000,000%.
I went and did an interview with a group called the SAS, the Sikh Awareness Society. And these are a little cadre of hardcore Sikhs that have got child protection at their paramount. The Sikh community all dip in a tenner each, and they fund these guys. You don't get any Christian groups doing that. I mean, I've called out so many times, come on, let's have a little bit of funding so we can use our any person powers that are set out under Section 24 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, which allowed us to go and detain these people. You don't get anything from anyone, you know, it's shocking. But the Sikhs, what they do is they go to the police and they do everything respectfully, and they say, look, this child's in trouble, we want you to deal with this. They don't, so they deal with it. Not only do they deal with it, they go and save the child, and they just steam in like the warriors they are. And I tell you, if I was to convert to religion, I'd go there. I think they're fantastic. And then they not only that, if the kids caught up in drugs and heroin, they see it through to total detox. 100% care plan they've got. And this is what guys like Chris Lambriano were doing when he was doing stuff for the lay community. I got a lot of money for them, and they were doing at a budget of what the government charge was seeing addiction right the way through to being
Chris
clean.
Lambriani, shout out to Chris, what an amazing man.
I love him.
Chris was charged with murder with the craze, and then did his sentence, turned to Christ, and now in his 80s he's still helping people. But I think we'll touch on now, John, is the craze, because I know a lot of people glorify them, but over the last few weeks I've interviewed people with the craze. They were dirty bastards. So they were, I believe, the information that I'm getting is they had young boys who were giving up with politicians. They were evil bastards.
They went away because they were bribing politicians, in my opinion, and they were bribing them because of the sex parties they were running. And I've heard things, you know, I've got to be careful again because sometimes I'm in this community, but I am not a fan of them. I've heard some appalling things that they're involved in.
Because sorry for interrupting, but information that I got when Ronnie Craig got the jail, he was in bed with a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah.
So he was, and I didn't know this stuff just a few weeks ago when people were pointing out, and I was thinking they're just haters. But the more information I've been getting, it's becoming clear that they were.
And Reggie Cray was involved with boys as well.
Yeah.
You know, and young kids, runaway kids. There's a fantastic interview, and I'm trying to find it because I can't remember who actually they were interviewing, and it was an old East End guy, and he sat in a pub, and he said, I was in here having a drink one day, and Ronnie Cray was there and Reggie Cray was there, and a young boy come in, a young kid. He said he was young and he was cold and he was wet, and he went over and Ronnie put him on his knee. And this bloke said, I'd heard the rumours. So again, it was an open, you know. And he said, Ronnie said to him, go upstairs and have a shower. I'll be up in a minute. And this guy turned around and said, he said, I pulled out a gun and said, if you go up with that kid, I'll do you here. I'll do you here. And he said, Ronnie just laughed and went, I was only joking. He said, I knew what was going on. You know, so I hear that a lot, and I do. So I'm not a fan, and I haven't been at all. And I don't want to glorify. Crime causes victims, and so these victims could be, you know, your children and all that. You know, and I've dealt with victims of crime, and it is wrong.
Yeah, that's what I need to be careful as well, John. Obviously, I have a lot of criminals on.
Yeah.
I don't ever glorify these men. I like to understand their backgrounds,
Exactly.
their product, their environment. But we always touch on the victims, but I need to be careful that I don't glorify it, because, like I say, when I'm hearing this stuff about the craze, and I've had people on speaking about the craze, I'm thinking, fuck me, man, I shouldn't be promoting the craze. The information, it might not be 100% accurate, but if a lot of people are shouting it, then something must be right, John.
That seems to be the way it goes. There is a lot of people shouting stuff.
Yeah.
And someone said something interesting to me about the first film that was made about them. And you've got Stephen Burkoff is playing one of the Richardson brothers, and he's shouting about the craze, and he's got a newspaper. And someone said, if you look at that newspaper, it's got another boy goes missing. As a headline on the paper, whether or not that's a subtext or whether or not it's coincidental.
There's subliminal messages in every film, I believe.
Yeah, of course, a hell of a lot. But again, I'm not a fan of it. I mean, I do lots with Chris because Chris helps people.
Yeah.
And that has been our common ground, helping people.
Yeah.
And I go into environments with him where, you know, there are people that may be still active in that line. I don't know, but that's not my concern. That's not. And why would they get up with me? I'm not going to impact on their life. I'm no longer a policeman. I've got no power. And everyone I work with now has done a lot of time inside.
How's your paranoia, John?
I'm not bothered. I'm not bothered because I'm not out to screw no one over. I just want to expose corruption, right? And again, I talk quite out against corruption within the police. I like the police because we need a police force, but I don't like the corruption. I don't like the cover-ups. The problem I've got, the people who hate me are paedophiles and Satanists, and they hate me with a vengeance. Google my name, the amount of stuff that's out there. My God, it's like a Disney World for paedophiles and Satanists. It's like John Wedge is this and John Wedge. They love attacking me, but it's like a guy who investigates satanic crime says to me, "If they hate you, you're doing a good job, my friend." So I'm not. I mean, I've been in some dicey situations with people that are very clearly mentally damaged, you know, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, I've got no backup here. I could get seriously hurt here. And one guy said to me, if I open up, I'm vulnerable. And when I'm vulnerable, I'm dangerous. And as I'm talking to you, I want to open up. And he said, I could be very, very dangerous to you. And he said to me, do you see a dangerous man? And I said to him, I'll be honest with you, my friend, I see a frightened boy. And he looked at me and said, that's how I feel, John.
Yeah.
So I feel, and then we got on all right after that. So the anger has come from fear.
That's all it is. You know yourself, John, and I do a lot of studying with the brain as well, and you'll tend to say the loudest, and I say it umpteen times, but the loudest men are the weakest, like the gangsters who hold a knife or a gun.
Yeah.
For me, that's a sense of insecurity, where that's their comfort blanket, where if they hold a gun, that protects them because they're so fragile, they're so fearful. Glasgow's a rough area. There's a lot of tough areas, but if you look at someone the wrong way, they go, what are you looking at? But realistically, they're scared that you see through their vulnerability. So this is where their anger and frustration comes in. I believe that but obviously it's difficult for you, but everybody has got goodness in them in some ways.
Of course.
From a young age, those effects, those trigger points where to build those monsters, there's got to be a ripple effect from it where they've created those with like paedophiles. But do you think there's enough things in place, John, for someone who has the feelings for kids, but yet who can they go and speak to?
Well, this is where you need proper therapists involved. There is a woman that I did an interview with called Corinne Hutzabart, and she's a profiler and par excellence. She's on the FBI's top 10, and she is the only one that will work with paedophiles. And she said, I will work with them because if I help them, they don't hurt kids. And I like her thinking.
Yeah.
So she
must get a lot of shit from that.
Yeah, she said, but I'm the only one who does it. And I'm the authority on paedophile mind. So when there's a paedophile murder, they come to me because I know their mind. So she does, and she said that 90% of them have got can be cured, 90%, but there will be this small percentage that can't. But she said you cannot and should never work with them unless they have resolved all their crimes and they help you. Yeah,
so it's become honest and tell you what they've actually done
and help others.
Do they say it's a chemical imbalance, John, in the brain?
Well, it may well be, but the one thing's for certain, they do it because they enjoy it. They enjoy it. And you're talking about a very devious mind, and you're talking a very patient criminal as well. They will wait years and years and years. If they want a girl at a certain age or a boy at a certain age, they will be patient and wait. They will groom these. And this is one thing I speak out against, and I want to give a big shout out, if I may take this superb opportunity and the big coverage you've got, because Tyson Fury in my opinion, is an icon for the youth, because he's actually trying to install family values back into this country, and he speaks out against the child abuse and everything, and he's done that quite openly, and he had his videos removed from it. We need to keep our families strong, because when they're strong, they get preyed on. And we unfortunately have fallen in, probably by social engineering, into this baby mother, baby father culture. And okay, it might be all trendy and funny, but when things go wrong and you've got no safety blankets, your kids are going to care, and your kids that get hurt, and the kids can't run, they're stuck there, they've got nowhere to go. And these vultures, and I would say if people ever see what I've seen, they could ever go into my mind and see the horrific things I've seen and the testimonies of the people I've dealt with, they will realise that your children are the most precious thing you've got. Sod everything else, sod the car, sod the holiday, you look after your children first. And we've got a long way to go before we're there, but we're getting there. We are seeing now the backlash of all this. We are seeing the mental health system collapse because of all the problems they're having with drug addiction. It will all in the end come down to a common denominator, and that is a damaged child.
Yeah, well, they say over 70% of addiction comes and trauma has the biggest connection from trauma, and addiction is over 70%. 70% of people who have addiction have had childhood trauma.
Well, if you look back in the day, and we can go right the way back with this, because I was discussing this the other day. If you look at the British, when they changed the laws, they brought in the Vagrancy Act to stop people sleeping on the streets. And that was because the soldiers were coming back from the Napoleonic conflicts, and once they'd won them, they were all kicked out of the army, and they were laying on the streets. It had become a national disgrace. So they thought, what we're going to do about this, we'll make it illegal to sleep on the streets, get rid of them. And then you got the First World War occurred, and people coming back from the most horrific traumas, and what were they doing? They weren't working, they were getting pissed. So they brought in the Licensing Act to stop them drinking during the day. That's when it came in, the Licensing Act. This is also when they brought in the D notices to stop people talking about things. D notices, they're serving them on people speaking out against child abuse. It's a defence notice. It's a military intelligence tool. It should never be a civilian weapon. So we're obviously worried about something. And then you've got the Second World War occurred. Again, these people are just getting out of trauma, and they're back into it. We're now children and grandchildren of trauma, and a very disciplined system. They're discipline installed in schools, in Sunday schools, and everything else, and they're fighting horrific campaigns. They knew there was a coup d'etat going to occur in the late 40s, right? They knew it. And this is why they got rid of conscription, because men were walking onto parade grounds and taking children, saying, "You're not having my son, he ain't fighting." Right, and that they knew that these men were tough guys. The British were a tough race of people, and they were trained in soldiering. So that's when they built all these council houses. All these council estates went up in the 50s. They were to placate these soldiers, and then they built these working men clubs, these CRU clubs sprung up everywhere. Get them pissed on cheap booze, give the old side, and they knew brainwashing, and then of course after that you started getting these big children's homes cropping up everywhere, right? Because there was a lot of problems, and of course who were working in these? Damaged people. There was one care home, the caretaker had been interned in the Japanese war camps and was carrying on his torture on the children. So you've got generation after generation of trauma,
pain,
and the kids, they were subduing them. They were giving them Largactil. Now, what happens when you chemically subdue someone on a downer, right? You're going to hardwire it into their brain that you need to have a liquid drug or whatever going through your system in order to survive. So many of them that were given Largactil will then end up sloping into heroin addiction.
See the children's homes as well. Barbara O'Hare says the children's homes, John, that they were all next to a river. They were all next to water.
Yeah. There's a famous one in Stoke as well. They were chucking them in.
Yeah, just throwing kids in. What do you think with the Jeffrey Epstein thing just now?
Well, again, convicted paedophile. You draw the parallel between him and Pablo Escobar. Virtually Escobar was allowed to build his own prison, right? He'll go away, but in his own prison. They did the same to Jeffrey Epstein, didn't they? They allowed him to serve his own sentence, go home, go to work. So who was he protecting? And of course, his involvement with Prince Andrew and many others. A whole list of.
Why do you think the Prince Andrew video was only released now? after his death?
Well, everything comes posthumously, doesn't it? Again, Jimmy Savile, it's always. The intelligence, again, this is where it's important that police officers, now there are a lot of people that won't like the old bill, right? I get that to a degree, but you've got to get over this. It's like people saying to me, those that abuse children, no it is, it's the Jews, it's the Masons. No, it is not. People who abuse children are paedophiles. And again, the police are all part of the system. No, they're not. I mean, I saw corruption, right, in the police. I saw stupidity low down. I saw people getting slapped about. Back in the day, everyone got a bit of a spanking, and that's just how it was. In the CID, it was a bit more thought out, you know, and stuff went missing sometimes, you know, and that's up to them if they want to do that, you know. But then when I encountered the cover-up of this child abuse, that was just like so wrong. But the point linking into Epstein was that the police had known about it. Now, we're talking about America. We're talking about the British military intelligence. They're the best in the world. You know, they'd allowed Ted Heath to get away with what he was doing. They'd allowed Leon Britton to get away with what he's doing. We're only seeing that revisited over there in Pedo Island with Epstein and all the others, you know, and it would have all been recorded, it would have all been documented. That's why when coppers speak out, they need total protection, and they should not become under the protection of the police. There should be a special government unit that looks after them.
Do you think the police, a lot of police have a lot of information on paedophiles but are too scared to come forward?
Depends what unit. There will be, but certain units will have a lot more than others. And you know, again, you've got two strands. You've got those, for me it was a moral duty, it was wrong, there's no way this is happening, and I was prepared to take that bold step and stand up against this machine. And you know, it had teeth and it hurt me, and I suffered greatly, and I did. And if I can go in, allude to some of the things they did to me in order to silence me, I gladly will. But there are other coppers that don't know anything. The uniformed coppers on the whole don't know anything. So to point a finger at a uniformed copper and say they cover up, no they don't. You know, child abuse units, yes, you're getting near to it. And then we've taken specialist units like Scotland Yard units and special branch, 100% they were covering it up. And that has just been proven in the recent government inquiries.
Pedo Island, John, what you were saying there from the Epstein scandal, what is Pedo Island?
Well, it's his private island, isn't it, where it was all going on. But islands crop up all the time. I mean, we had Hope de la Garenne in Jersey. Again, you were saying about this Ashton Hall. Hope de la Garenne was exactly the same in Jersey, and that's surrounded by water. And if you chuck a body of a child into a rocky sea, it doesn't get trawl. You can't trawl rocky sea. You've got to go out. So if kids are chucked in by the rocks, they're never going to be found, you know, unless there's a diver going there or something, they might find them. And then you've got marine wildlife that will soon eat it up. So water's always a good way. And water destroys DNA. So once a body's chucked in the water, any DNA in that is just ruined. It's just destroyed, and it's very difficult to determine cause of death once a body has been underwater for a while, unless there is a bullet hole or something like that. You know, so water will always be a place of choice, and if it's fast flowing, it's unlikely to have divers going in there.
Why do you think Jill Dando was murdered?
I think she knew what was going on, and I think there was. I think she had information on a famous singing celebrity. Myself, or I'm not going to say anything, but I think she knew, and I think many others. I think Whitney Houston knew what was going on.
I think they say Jill Dando was friends with one of the singers.
Yeah,
profile singers.
Yeah, of course.
But I heard that she was going to release a documentary unveiling a lot of big names.
Yeah, of course. No doubt. I mean, when I first started, I was taken to a police building in South London, and it was called the FIB, the Force Intelligence Bureau. And there was a guy there who said, look, there's the Police National Computer, the PNC, and there's another one. And he said, look, I'll type it up. And he actually typed in the Cray twins details and come up with all their offences, right, you know, that were on there. And he typed in a famous singer, who might not know Jill Dando, who's actually got a different name, come up with his convictions, and they were for indecency. And there was there's a woman who's an actress, who, again, I can't say it, she's always on the telly, always ever so pretty, very old, very pretty, very glamorous, very British, and she's got convictions, you know, for sexual offences, always on the telly.
On kids?
No, but it's to do with prostitution, you know, and you sit there and they're like, you know, the epitome of decent Britishness, and she's a prostitute, a street prostitute, and got convictions for it. And it's seen. So the intelligence is incredible. What the police know is absolutely phenomenal.
So why can't they use it? Because I know the press have written lots of shit about me. So why can't they write about the information that they have?
And I'll tell you why. Because this is where it gets dangerous. Because you may think the people you talk to, you could be a threat. And then all of a sudden you'll say something innocuous and you will become a threat, because if you say anything that harms the political or the economic stability of this country, you go outside of the remit of the police, because the police probably can't be asked, right? And if they can, it'll be too complicated. What offences have you committed and everything else? The moment that you say anything that's going to upset the political or the economic stability, the MI units, the military intelligence units, get involved, and then that's it, you're gone. So when you get people like whistleblowers like Melanie Shaw, who was talking out about Prince Andrew, she ended up being banged up. There's a woman called Carol Woods who's been banged up, and they end up in mental institutions, or they end up in car crashes, or the police's famous one was car crashes, and there was quite a few people that had involvement with Diana, intimate involvement with Diana. One copper in particular, and he had a bizarre car crash. I know of one woman that was picked up one night for drink driving, and she'd crashed into somewhere. The police went to her, and the copper, he was perturbed by her because she called him Gov. And the moment she said Gov, they've done time, And thinking, anyway, her name checks out, she's not known, but it's like something's not right. He recognises her face, takes her to the police station, takes her fingerprints, and goes up to Scotland Yard where they'd have an expert there on call that would go through the fingerprints. But she was on her way to Brixton, so he went down to Brixton police station, and back then every local area used to have an index of all your criminals. Everyone was nicked. They take the photo and they put it in a card. Women were in like a red. No, women were in. I think they were in like a different colour box. The men. There was loads of men, and there would be a red one that would be the paedophiles, and you look at the paedos, you saw straight away what they were, but there weren't many women, so he thought, I'm going to give it a check. Pulls out his card, and it's her, but a different name. So goes back to the police station, name checks her, goes to the cell, calls out this name on the card, and she's like, I'm in trouble, you've got to help. And within minutes, Special Branch turned up and whisked her away. And I said, who was she? She said, well, she exposed a politician that was involved with sex, prostitutes, drugs. Mm-hmm. Quite a well-known politician who went on to write books. And it turned out that this politician had put on a contract for her life. And she was in risk for her life for coming back to London. But Special Branch knew about this, and this guy is still seen as, an authority on certain things. But, the bloke's put out a contract. Why is he not inside for conspiracy to murder? But that is when, if you end up going into that remit and saying things that are going to politically unstable this country, that's why politicians, Ted Heath brought the UK into Europe. Did he do so because he liked Europe, or did he do so because there was pictures of him? Mm-hmm. Again, Leon Britton had involvement with Northern Ireland.
A lot of blackmail then.
Massive amounts. And I spoke to two guys that were abused in a care home, and the IRA were behind the abuse. I've heard that a few times now, that the IRA behind child abuse as well. So when we're going about gangsters involved, there's also the IRA involved. Everyone's involved. It's big business. Drugs you can use a million times. Drugs you can use once, child you can use a million times. And a child, you can always coerce with a child. Years ago, it was... Back in the 40s, if someone had an affair, it was, people committed suicide if they were caught over the side, but now, what's it matter? Not a problem. But then it became homosexuality. It was illegal until 1953 to be a homosexual. And the guy who got these laws repealed was a bloke called Montague of Bewley. Well, he got them repealed because he was raping his own son. And was a member of Churchill's cabinet. That's why he got, there's always a reason why. But then it doesn't hold water anymore, And George Michael was quite famous for standing up and saying, I'm gay, so what? When Sony were trying to bribe him, he was like, well, so what? Do what you want. I'm gay, and that's what everyone knows it anyway. It's no secret. Yeah. But child abuse, that's the ultimate taboo.
Yeah,
it's still not acceptable. So, and it was still always...
It's never going to be acceptable.
But when you get like that book I showed you earlier, when it goes on about the posh schools, the fee-paying schools, and how it was rife in there. So you're taking these politicians, these cabinet ministers that have come from Eton.
Yeah.
I mean, Eton has provided 11 prime ministers, you know, and you've got the raping of young boys under the fagging system is endemic.
Skull and Bones at Eton?
No. That's Yale. Eton is the posh boys' school. In the UK, you know, it's near Windsor, and you know, and it's rugger, bugger, and all that sort of stuff. So these kids are sort of, you know, caned and raped into line.
It's sad as well when you see guys like George Michael, Elton John, Freddie Mercury, I believe, were there. They were all married as well. But you tend to see they'll come out once they're going to be exposed for being gay. Listen, I don't care who you are, what you are, be who you want to be. And you look at the Philip Schofield thing just now, where was he coming out because he just felt enough was enough, he just wanted to be free, or was he coming out because someone else was going to expose him?
Well, of course, and you know what? Who the effing hell's Philip Schofield anyway? You know, and why are people wasting their time with that moron? You know, I don't care for him. There are kids dying daily at the hands of paedophiles in this country, and no one gives them one thought. You know? I
don't think they were hailing him a hero. There's nowhere near a hero because he ain't fought in World War II. He ain't got a cure for cancer. This man was cheating on his wife for 27 years. This man was allegedly cheating on his wife for 27 years. Not the fact that he was lying to her for 27 years. He knew that he was gay before he married her, so he was tagging this woman along. And you speak out about this, people call you a homophobe, this or that. You can have an opinion. Just because he's gay doesn't give him a free pass that you can't have an opinion on it. So be who you want to be, but as long as you're not hurting anyone.
It's quite bizarre, James, because I get I get trolled a lot and all that, and I don't give it a thought anymore. And I go on the street and people come up to me and they hug me and say, "Keep going, John, keep going," because they're victims and they want help, and I'm there for them. You know, I'm not there for the trolls and like. But I get quite a big following from lesbians, and it was funny because when I worked with the street prostitutes in the police, they a lot of them were lesbians, and I said, "Well, what is it? You're messing around with blokes, but you're a lesbian." And went, "But men hurt us." So there was this deep trauma which spurred this. You know, again, it's very controversial, but the ones I speak to that went into this lifestyle choice, as it were, whatever, right? I've not got a problem. I'm cool with that. And one of them helped me out massively when I went into Parliament. She came and supported me when I went before the Home Office. God bless her. God bless you, Vanessa, if you're watching. Well done. But then I get Christians behind me because I speak out against Satanism and abuse, and of course I want the families to stick together. But of course then these two groups don't really mix. So if we have a get together or something, I always usually say, you know, come, we'll go and have a drink, and then these arguments. And I had to one day intervene, and I said, you know, you've got to stop this. You know, I don't want this. We're here for the same reason, to help children. Whatever your views on, you know, the gay issue, and they don't like Christians because Jesus don't accept homosexuality and all this sort of stuff, and therefore I have to take the middle line on this, because you know I don't want to get caught up in it. It's the same with the politics of things. I get a lot of people wanting me to go on about the Muslim grooming gangs. I never dealt with Muslim grooming gangs. You know, it was not indicative of what I was dealing with in London, the most diverse city. 80% of all the abuse goes on in the home anyway. You know, and I'm not decrying the Muslim grooming gangs. Yes, it goes on. Yes, it's a massive problem, but it weren't my reality, so therefore I'm not going to go in it. You know, I can only deal with what I know about. So I won't I'll go there, but then I'll get attacked that John's not speaking out against the Muslims. You know, well, there's enough people doing that. They don't need my help. You know, they can do that. But what we've got to do is all come together, because abusing children is wrong. And all this,
no matter the colour,
exactly. Religion, and all this emphasis on Philip Schofield, who gives a toss for him? You know, and really, and if you've got the time to sit and watch that more on day and not doing something productive with your day, well, you're entitled to your opinion, but keep it to yourself, because you know. So, and I think it's all a distraction, a lot of it.
Of course, same as a coronavirus.
Well, exactly, a load of old nonsense. We was meant to be dead of AIDS years ago.
It's all man-made, I believe, anyway.
Well, James, look at that thing that they were saying back in the 80s, that it was
mad cow disease,
acid rain.
Yeah, you had Ebola as well.
Acid rain was going to wipe out all the Scandinavian.
Yeah, it's a distraction for what's really going on.
You know, and it's funny enough that when we're going on about exposing the paedophiles in this country, you look at what happens straight away. And I said this to Sean Atwood, and I said, Sean, the UK has got a golden opportunity here, and that first off, it was Jimmy Savile. Secondly, it was Prince Andrew. Do not let this one drop. We need to milk this one.
Well, you look at how the press, when Harry and his missus
done one, didn't they?
How much negative press and how much hatred, but yet Prince Andrew did an interview, and now it's went quiet.
Yeah.
To basically saying he went to Epstein's house after being convicted a paedophile to say I was only going to break up with my friendship with him, but he stayed fucking over a week or 4 days, whatever it was, in his house. Do you know what I mean? So it's a deflection. People need to waken up and realise whatever you're watching on the TV is to deflect you away from the real shit that's happening.
Well, they put their brains on the shelf, and I said to one guy, and I said, look, you know, you believe in all this crap on the telly. If your wife comes home, she starts a new job, she's late one day. Okay, what happened? I went for a drink. Not a problem. Next week, she's late too. You know, and then she cuts coming back, she starts smelling of aftershave, and then she's not interested in sleeping with you, and then money goes out of the account. It's not going to be long before you think, hang on, something's going on here, you know. The detective mind comes in, and again, women are better at detecting these things than men are, so if it was the other way round, it wouldn't take as long. So that natural curiosity and something smells and something's rotten here. But when it comes to like the celebrities, and they accept this bullshit they come out with, and then Prince Andrew, when he said that, he should be ashamed of himself, but they're not. They think we're stupid. They think we are here to be used by them.
They're slaves to them.
They're slaves to them. And again, if it's normal to them, what lifestyle have they been brought up in? You know, a guy come to me, and he used to shoe the horses for the Ferguson family. And he used to say, I won't go on about it because it's still alive. He said, you want to see what goes on in their house? In their big manner. He said, don't ever call these people sir or ma'am, John. Don't ever do it. Because there's nothing honourable about them.
What do you think about what's your opinion on Madeleine McCann case?
Well, it's interesting because I knew a woman that had involvement in that from early on. She's not she's police staff, but she's not an investigator. And my opinion is that they killed her, Jerry and Kate. What I've heard is that they were swingers, you know, and that they'd been anaesthetising the young girl, and maybe the girl body had to be disposed of because if it was found, it may well have had signs of sexual interference, which would then put an inference on the other two children being looked at, and maybe prevented anyone from leaving that country. And that Concalves, the guy there, you know, again, this is typical British snobbery. You know, they denigrated and rubbished him and tried to take the investigation over to him. It's a Portuguese investigation. They're under Napoleonic law. We're under common law. We have no jurisdiction in that country at all. What the hell were the British police doing there? They weren't assisting because they didn't want their assistance. They had it under wraps. So certain was Concalves that they did it that he wrote a book. And of course, Kate McCann went out of her way to destroy his credibility, so he went and wrote another book, and he won the libel case as well, Concalves. The other thing, which I find wholly despicable, I brought up 4 kids on my own. I wouldn't go anywhere where I couldn't take my kids. So what are you doing leaving your kids? You know, it's Portugal. It's a kid-friendly country. It's not that important that your kids aren't there. You do everything, you know, so that in itself is abandonment. So it should have been done for abandonment, because what's an offence abroad is offence at home if it's arrestable and you're a British subject. And the other thing, they brought a dog in, the sniffer dog, right?
That was one of the most
the best
trained
dog
in the world
ever. Yeah. The FBI took it on afterwards. That dog picked up a cadaver scent, right? And it did.
What's a cadaver scent? Blood?
It's a dead body. A cadaver's a dead body. So it picked up, and it was a positive hit. You can see the dog isn't lying. It picks it up in certain locations, and apparently it double stunk in the car. You know, because they said the body was put in there in a state of decomposition. Because when a body dies, the bacteria gets released and off it goes. The onset is straight away. It's immediate. What was tragic about that was Haute de la Garenne, the children's home in Jersey, in which, very similar to that Ashton Hall, there were sex parties going on. If you ever get a chance, watch a video called Sun, Sea and Satan by Pie Mash Films. Fantastic documentary about that. The copper called Lenny Harper, who's one of our little gang of whistleblowers. Big respect to you, Lenny, one of the bravest guys I know, my friend. And he stood up and he was crushed like I was, because he exposed what was going on in the investigation in Jersey where children were being killed. They used the same dog, and the same dog picked up the scent of dead bodies in Jersey. They were doing everything they can to destroy the investigation in Jersey. They found human skull. It was identified by an anthropologist as human skull. It had collagen on it. Right, it got sent off. When it come back, they said it was coconut shell. But the dog corroborated the anthropologist and the archaeologist and everything. So when Kate McCann attacked that dog, his credibility, which I don't know how she did that anyway, because it can't, the dog was infallible, you know. But she did. So they couldn't use the dog's evidence. That then discredited the dog in the Jersey case as well. So that collapsed. So the damage that woman's done, you know. And one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, and I took an interest in it because I dealt with it myself, was Embedded Confessions by Peter Hyatt, the American statement analyst, and he analyses the transcription of Kate and Jerry McCann, and his findings were pretty much what I thought was going on anyway. He's absolutely brilliant, this guy. And he just says they've killed the child. It was an accident, but he won't rule up sexual abuse as well. And he's brilliant. Embedded Confessions, YouTube, Embedded Confessions.
Yeah, I'll put all the links to this on the description.
But yeah, and of course you've got to look at who these people are. They're both doctors, high society people. You know, kids are abused and killed all day long. You know, and so why are they bothering with this family? Why?
Yeah. So how bad, with the Jimmy Savile stuff as well, John, how bad was he? How evil was Jimmy Savile?
Oh yeah, he's prolific. And they knew him. They knew what he was doing. You know, for a long time. This bloke was picked up, I think he was picked up in the late 50s for his shenanigans. And he continued and he continued. And look how many of the people come to his assistance. You know, even the Royal Marines carried his coffin. What was going on there, you know? And he had keys to all the hospitals. My son, I nearly lost one of my boys a couple of years ago in a horrific accident, and he's paralysed now, unfortunately. And he was in Stoke Mandeville Hospital. He was in intensive care one place. They moved into the spinal injuries unit, and I used to laugh when I go down there because it was a Jimmy Savile hospital. He set it up, and there's nothing to do with Jimmy Savile in there at all. And I said to the nurse, I said, "Where's all the Jimmy Savile stuff?" She said, "We were told overnight everything's to come down and nothing's to go up there." But I spoke to one victim who come to me, and she was in a kids' hospital, and Jimmy Savile came in, and one of the nurses came in before and said, "Just make out everyone's asleep, make out you're all asleep," just because they knew what he was doing, you see. And she said he came in with a nurse, and he started like French kissing this girl, and then he sexually assaulted her, right? While the nurse just turned her back. Said the nurse just turned her back and looked the other way. So it's not just him, it's the facilitators. I'd hang a lot of them. You know, in order for them to work, who drove him about?
Yeah, well, the security guards, the drivers.
Well, he killed himself, didn't he? Jimmy Savile's security guard killed himself.
Because of probably the information that he had.
He was procuring boys, and he was supplying them. A good book to read is Playland by Anthony Daly, and it opens out so much what was going on with the rent boys in London, and that sort of ties in with
because it says it had ties with a morgue as well, where he was going in,
he's
and
a
they
necrophiliac.
Apparently had sexual activities with dead bodies.
Yeah.
Is that what that word? What's that word?
Necrophilia.
Is that what that means?
Yeah. Necrophile is sexually attracted to dead bodies.
Is that true then?
Yeah. And he had the keys to, I think, to Leeds Royal Infirmary, the mortuary there. You know, I mean, the bloke was, but he weren't acting alone. He wasn't acting. I mean, he was friends with Frank Bruno. He was friends with Peter Sutcliffe. I mean, he got in with everyone. This guy, you know. And I don't know. I just don't trust any of it no more. You know.
Yeah, he had photos with a lot of people, but not necessarily. Nobody would have really knew then, because they're thinking he could have a lot of opportunities for me to open doors, but yet not realising.
Peter Sutcliffe is a strange one, because
is that the mass murderer?
Yeah, the Yorkshire Ripper. Yeah. And he says something really strange, because he goes on about the last murder, because he was just murdering prostitutes. And I actually knew one of his victims who got away, and he allegedly murdered one girl who was totally out of the profile, wasn't a prostitute, was a young girl, And when they interviewed him, he was saying something like, "I didn't want to kill her, but my master was telling me to kill." And they always said it was God telling him, but he never identified it as God. He said, "My master was telling me." I looked up, my master was telling me to kill, and he whacked her head in with a hammer. And there was rumours that was Savile. Was telling him to kill, and the body was found in Roundhay Park near to Savile's residence.
Because you said as well, when the kids at children's homes were also getting threatened, a young boy you spoke to was getting threatened to have rape the other girl at the children's home, and he blamed himself.
Yeah, they would make the children see. This is a conspiracy of silence. So they'd get the kids to have sex with whoever, get a boy to then rape their abuser, and then say you're a rapist. They'd get that. Then there's one guy, him and his brother were identical twins, and they were made to rape each other. You know, identical twins. I knew it the same with a boy and a girl. Were made to do this, young boy and a girl. One lad was told to rape other girls, and if he didn't, his sister would be raped. And these were all by members of the children's homes. You know, these are all by managers of the children's homes. So again, who facilitates this? Where are the security teams, the night watchmen? Where are the doctors that then have to deal with these children? Because, you know, you're talking long-term injuries here. I mean, one guy I spoke to the other day, he said, look, I want to do an interview and I want to tell people what's happened to me. He can't keep a job down, and he has to take 2 pairs of trousers and underpants because he shits himself, he defecates himself because of the sexual abuse he endured. So his colon and his anus are ripped apart. And what people don't know is the vagina is different to the anus, and I don't mean to be technical, but people need to understand something. The vagina is like a ball of muscle that contracts, and it's designed to take, expansion.
A baby goes in and out, yeah.
The anus isn't. An anus actually is a chain. It's links of muscles that link around into a ring. It's called a sphincter, and they link like that. And when you rupture that, them links break. They don't go back. It's not like the wall that contracts. They don't go back. So when you're taking 3-year-old boys, which went on a lot, and a grown man's erect penis is going in there, and probably not without force either, you're going to rupture that little kid. There are men that not only defecate themselves, but have got spinal injuries, where the lower portion of their the coccyx spine has been broken and snapped. Women, so many women can't have children because their wombs are misaligned. So you've got a little girl's genitalia has been totally misaligned, you know, and the damage. So this wouldn't be without its consequence of injury. You're going to get a lot of bleeding, a lot of rupturing, a lot of scarring, a lot of stitching up. Doctors would have had to have been used. These would have gone to matrons. There would have been sexually transmitted diseases, and there were. You know, you're talking about gonorrhea and syphilis that a lot of these children were infected with. You know, and now you're catching things like contagious tuberculosis, hepatitis C, and AIDS that the kids are getting. This is the reality that we need to drive home to people when they say, "Oh, it's abuse, it's abuse." When you take people like Lord Janner, numerous scores, dozens of victims. We'll never know how many victims, and he's being protected because his son's a well-known barrister. We talked Leon Britton, protected because they were cabinet ministers, and Ted Heath. They were destroying, you know, these body parts of these kids. And it's not just a physical abuse, you know, that I've graphically described. What does it do to the mind? What does that do to that young mind, that troubled mind throughout the whole, timeline? You know, the alcoholism, the hatred, the anger, the distorted thinking. It's just inconsequential, you know. And this is what needs. This should be a national policing priority. It should be an international policing priority because kids are moved about, and it isn't. You know, Westminster. When I worked in Westminster, their policing priority one year was cycling on the pavement. People cycling bikes with over a 20-inch wheel on the pavement was a policing priority, not the rape of young children. And this was at Belgravia Police Station, where at the back was Sloane Square, which was a meat rack in itself that would supply all the posh houses, Eaton Square, and all the rich hoi polloi that live around there.
Mike Tarriger, had on the podcast.
You know, Mike,
meat rack boy, yeah.
Because Mike, Mike called out.
He's a great man, by the way.
I went to call out. He called out to me, and I did the first interview with Michael. And the one thing that struck Michael was his intelligence and his candidature, and the fact that he was prepared to speak. But you know.
So much joy, man. It's fucking.
Listen, James. Once you lift that rock, man, and you see that underbelly, that vermin, you will never ever look at anything again. You can't pull it back, because once it's open, it's out. And this is what we got to do. When you shine the light in the sewers, them rats will run. They'll bite you, but they'll run. When I took this on, I thought I would be facing the devil, and I thought the devil would be like a grizzly bear standing in front of me like a great white shark. No, he ain't.
Coward.
The devil is like a mosquito. You know, it's like a pebble in your shoe, crumbs in your bed, and then you get all the trolls niggling. And they're only doing the devil's work. And I don't know, put this into a religious connotation, but it was like stinging nettles and mosquitoes stinging you and wasps. It was just all petty annoyances that just totally trouble you constantly. And this is what they want to do. They want to detract you from your path and your calling and what you're meant to be doing. We are making phenomenal headway. You know, we are seeing all these groups coming together now. We've got our march coming up on the 16th of May.
Where is this? So everything you get
right, this needs a massive shout out. I've got these badges. Do I stick it up against
just stick it up. Yeah, we'll take photos of it anyway.
Right. This was paid for by let's just say they call them the 1% Club, right? So those in the know will say, I'm not allowed to say who they are. And they've paid for these badges, and they're going to go and sell for £2 a piece. There's 500 of them, so that will put money in the pot for further campaigns. The Beach Home Survivors Group have set up a demonstration, of which I'm part of, and we're calling to all people who have been affected by child abuse, by the loss of a child, even by people being put into prison through life of criminality, alcohol addiction, drug addiction. It all stems from this suicide. Again, we're not even got into the suicide realms, you know. Self-harming, family courts. People have been wronged by all these groups, right? Anyone to do with anti-corruption. The paedophile hunter groups are sending a contingent. We've got a group called Quarriers Warriors from Glasgow coming, from the Quarriers Care Home. They're coming down. We've got the Sikhs are coming to give a talk. We've got various biker groups are coming. Military veterans are coming. I'm calling out to the military veterans. We love what you do. Black cab drivers, hoping they're going to turn up. The LTDA. The fire service, the fire brigade are changing laws. They changed the way people think about paedophilia in Belgium. They organise indirectly the largest protest we've ever seen anti-paedophile, when Marc Dutroux, the child murderer, the beast of Belgium, almost got away with it without notice. The fire service went to the parliamentary building and blew the windows out with their hoses, saying they were whitewashing the filth inside, and that prompted the biggest demonstration ever against child abuse. So the fire service are standing up actually against the police with the yellow vests, and I like them. In the police never got on with the fire brigade. That was just rivalry. Well, they just used to call the fire brigade a bunch of burglars, and you know, the LFB, they said London's finest burglars, and it was just
crazy, that both people are trying to save lives, but
and there was always this animosity anyway. But I'm calling out to you, please get in touch with me, come along, because you are changing things. You're an incredible bunch. You've got solidarity. The cab drivers have got solidarity. I've told Sean Atwood to come along. I said, because there is going to be food for future interviews. There's going to be some incredible testimonies they are given. Big Chris Lambriano is going to come down and speak out. We've got Christian groups, you know, we've got gay and lesbian groups coming, everyone. And we're seeing unity, and unity in a fight against child abuse. The only crime we need to bother about, the fight against child abuse. And if anyone's had enough of this, then it's the time to come down there. No rucking, 100% peaceful. There's going to be women and children now. Don't want any disruption. There's going to be Sikh groups, Muslim groups. I don't want none of this alt-right nonsense and racism, none of that. If we screw this up, we don't get another chance. We've got to make the government listen to us and say, we are not putting up with these cover-ups. We are not putting up with Prince Andrew getting away with this. We're not putting up with no more Jimmy Saviles, no more Leon Brittons, no more Lord Janners, no more massive cover-ups, no more children's home cover-ups, things like Aston Hall. We don't want this no more. and these doctors that are getting away with it, we don't want it, and we're saying no. And we are the majority, James, you know.
Well said, John. And listen, mate, I take my hat off to you. Fair play for what you're doing. You've just got to keep chipping away, and hopefully, will we ever see it in our day and age? I don't think so. But if we keep chipping away and leave a platform, then you can build the.
We'll see a start.
Yeah, build the bridge for other people to start walking over it, and then.
But James, we can't do nothing. We can't
mate,
do nothing.
Listen, I'm here, man. I don't know why I'm fucking here. I don't know why I'm interviewing yourself and Barbara O'Hare and Mike Tarrigan and the paedophile hunters. It just seems right. I want to turn my back. I know where it's going to go, but I can't.
Because it's a common denominator, and there's so many of them. I was talking to Sean's crew the other day, and they went, you were right, it's the cause of everything. It is. And I said, and if you talk to a lot of the criminals, honestly, a lot of them will say, I come
See,
from
for your
background.
rally as well, I know you says, do you worry that they pay agents to go down there and cause trouble?
They might do, who knows? But hopefully there'll be enough people to subdue it. And and again, I call out to the police. There won't be any trouble there, but work with us. But who knows? Who knows what's behind? I don't know what's going to happen to me. I don't know if the intelligence agencies have got the up with me. I don't know. But the one thing I do know is that people want me to keep speaking out. They want me to do what you do and put their testimonies out, because the devil wants our silence, and we ain't going to give him our silence.
Quite right. Before we finish up, John, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure to hear your story, brother. We'll get a part 2 going in the future.
Yeah, brilliant.
But for anybody that's maybe been abused or in the struggle, it's too scared to come forward, what information would you have for them? Yeah,
what I'd say is the shame and the guilt is not yours to hold. It isn't. You did nothing, right? They did this to you. You've got nothing to be ashamed of. If you want to put your testimony out, I will always facilitate that. There is help out there. I am at the point of collating a proper help list, of independent groups that are out there. But what I say is just have faith, because we are changing things. And those that are feeling suicidal and all that, and I just say, just please hang on in there. Hang on in there. Turn up at the rallies, talk with other survivors. This is a massive thing. When survivors meet other survivors, it really makes a difference. You're not alone. You're not alone. I thought I was alone in speaking out, and I realised I wasn't. And there were dark times for me. I can tell you, there were times when I thought I was going to lose it all, and I nearly lost, one of my kids through this.
Try and discredit you, John, when you speak
all
out?
the time, constantly. I can't get proper paid employment because the police refused my vetting. They said there was unresolved discipline issues with him. There weren't. I'm suing the police. I'm taking them on regarding the campaign of bullying, and they do everything. And of course, you get the trolling nonsense and all that. I get accused of working for MI5. I'll work for MI5. I'll have their wage. I'll have 40 grand a year and their pension. Yeah, bring it on.
Where can people get a hold of you, John?
Right, I'm on Facebook. You can message me through Facebook, Jon Wedger. I've got the John Wedger Foundation, Jon Wedger, WEDGER Foundation @gmail.com. Do it through there, and then we can work out phone dialogue if necessary. Boost my work, push it out there. Let's get it up in the millions. Let's send it across the globe. Let's all get together and let's just say no more. We don't want this no more. This is wrong. This is just so evil. It has to stop. There's no justification, and we can put an end to it, but we just need to all be brave.
Well done, John. Sorry, one more question. What do you think of the Julian Assange thing just now?
Well, again, has he been deported? Has he gone?
Don't think so.
I mean, it's just another example of when you speak out, what they'll do to you, and then of course they put him. The worst thing you can do to someone is put them in solitary confinement. And I tell you one thing, through my work in the prisons, I met a guy that was banged up with Abdul El Megrahi, the Lockerbie bomber.
Yeah.
I think it was either in Stockton or it was in Berlin.
He was in Berlin. He was in a special ward. He was in a special.
My mate got to meet him through the mosque. And he said, I said, did he get a hard time? He said, everyone knew he never bombed. And he said he was working, he said he was doing for the intelligence services like I do for you. He was giving them information. He was working for the British government.
He had his own hall where it was like the size of this. It wasn't a cell. It was he had his own wing. But a lot of people believed, he didn't do it.
And this is the other one. There was a very brave whistleblower. There was a case in Scotland, the Holly Greig case. Did you ever know about the Down syndrome girl who implicated?
Was that from Aberdeen? Yeah, some people keep telling me
Holly
to
Greig.
look into that.
Their whistleblower was a guy called Robert Green.
Killed them.
Yeah, he died in the end.
Yeah.
But they banged him up, and he got looked after in there, and he become a good friend of mine. And he turned around and I said, "How'd you get on the Scottish system? They hate the English in there." And he went, "A very good guy called Paul Ferris made sure I never got hurt." Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that was quite a nice thing, you know.
Yeah, Paul's a good friend of mine.
That he protected, someone stand up for the kids. So
yeah, definitely.
it shows, we can all work together,
Yeah, John. Listen,
Peace,
it's been an
fella.
absolute pleasure.
Cheers,
I wish you
James,
all the best for the future. Stay safe, and anything I can help with, just let me know.
Yeah, we'll come back.
Yeah,
Thank you.